This is our third day of this wonderful conference on cocoa agroforestry. We've been unpacking for several days now all the ways in which cocoa agroforestry can be a benefit to the environment. That was our first day, really honing in on that question. Our second day delved into how it is possible to structure cocoa agroforestry in order to make it work for industry, for government. So we explored finance, we explored an enabling environment that governments can create through law and policy. We looked at yields. And today, we have perhaps the most important day of all. This day, day 3 of Sweet Sustainability, is designed to unpack how it's possible to put farmer well-being and farmers at the heart of the decision-making and the co-creation of agroforestry systems. Many of us are working in cocoa sustainability on the problems of dire poverty and disempowerment, which bedevil the cocoa farmers today. We all know the average cocoa farmer makes about $1 per day. Something that's less well known is that the average woman cocoa farmer typically makes only around 30 cents per day. With this level of poverty, the situation is extremely dire. And so that makes it even more important at this juncture, with the price of the global price of cocoa so low for the last couple of years, to really think through how we can make cocoa agroforestry work for farmers. And so it's my great pleasure to kick us off with an opening session of the day. We had planned to have a dialogue between Eduardo Somariba and also Warren Sacco, but I believe that our co-speaker with Eduardo is not able to join us today. So instead of Warren Sacco, we will have Amoulay Touré joining us. So let me tell you a little bit about Eduardo and Amoulay. Eduardo is a legend in the world of agroforestry science. He has been working for over 34 years to advise governments, NGOs, companies, and development projects, mostly focusing on agroforestry. He doesn't just specialize in cocoa. He's actually an expert in cocoa agroforestry, of course, but also coffee, silvopastoral systems, and timber. So he's got a really multifaceted approach to this question. And he is the head of the program on agriculture, livestock, and agroforestry at Cartier. He's the focal point for FTA at Cartier. You will see many of his wonderful articles in the electronic library, which the Smithsonian has online on their website, which is the e-library we've talked about a couple times in the last couple of days, that brings together all the peer-reviewed science on cocoa agroforestry in the world and some of the gray literature, the best gray literature on cocoa agroforestry. So Eduardo is going to kick us off today with a perspective of how a scientist who has been working with farmers at the heart of his projects for many decades, how a scientist believes, based on the science, that we can work with farmers. And Amoulay Touré comes at this from a different angle. I think it's fair to say Amoulay is a human rights hero. I have known him for decades. He worked in some of the toughest situations in the Ivory Coast during the war, when he was the head of one of the most important human rights organizations in that country. And his predecessor had faced such severe threats that he had been forced into exile as a refugee. But with no regard for his personal safety, Amoulay led NIDH during the Ivorian Civil War. It's the Ivorian Human Rights Movement is how you translate that into English. He was one of the most influential human rights activists during the Civil War. After the Civil War, Amoulay was able to bring together NGOs from all different backgrounds to come together into a unified platform for human rights in the Ivory Coast. And that was a time of tremendous political dissent. So I think it's also fair to say, besides being a human rights hero, Amoulay is a peacemaker and someone who's able to bring many disparate perspectives together and fuse them into coalitions that fight for the greater good. But beyond his experience in the Ivory Coast, Amolai has also worked all over sub-Saharan Africa. He's worked for Amnesty International. He's worked for the Open Society Initiative, UNDP, NDI, IFES, Rights and Democracy. I could go on and on. He's had positions of tremendous leadership running different entities in Djibouti, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Benin, Kenya, Mali, Burkina Faso, and more. And he thus is able to really bring a kind of pan-African perspective on this. He's worked with farmers and communities all over Africa, and especially in the Ivory Coast, one of the biggest cocoa producers the biggest cocoa producer in the world. So I think Amolai will be able to ask Eduardo all kinds of questions around how civil society and how farmers and communities can be better empowered. And Eduardo, we think, will bring the science perspective. So Eduardo, you'd prepared some slides, and then we have a little dialogue for after your slides. So I hand it over to you. Let's go straight into your slides. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ethel, for this very kind introduction. I hope I can fulfill your expectations. Now we're gonna talk about how agroforestry works for farmers. Next slide, please. Next slide. I will center this presentation in around three major questions. First one, looking at whether agroforestry is really a farmer-centric alternative. And then we will focus on the challenges and opportunity to use agroforestry as a sound strategy for fulfilling farmers' livelihood needs. Next slide, please. I'll start telling that trees on farms in the way of different forms of agroforestry are commonplace, so everywhere. There's a global study showing that at least 30% of the total agricultural land in the world has up to 20% tree cover. And this is a lot of cover. So the presence of agroforestry and the trees on the feature of most farming system. Next slide, please. Just one example is showing that in every farm, trees show up in different contexts, different land uses, like this study in Nicaragua showing that you can find them in the coffee plantation, and the cocoa plantation, in the pasture lands, in home gardens, as part of the cropping system, in herbaceous crops like corn and beans. So trees are everywhere. And obviously, there are important changes in the density of these, with these trees show up in each one of these farming systems. Next one, please. In the case of cacao, the use of shade trees varies widely between producing countries. And I will show in the next slide this table that when you look at the percentage of the total cultivation area under cocoa use with shade, it varies widely, with a lot of shade trees in the Latin American context, but fewer trees in the African context, but with very important differences, like Cote d'Ivoire having less shade than many other crops. In those cocoa farming systems, the trees show up in different contexts, in different forms, different species, in different planting arrangement, and there are at least 6 different typologies that have been identified, broad typologies that vary obviously in densities and arrangement and species composition. Next, please. Next slide, please. Trees are there because they're useful, and they're useful for timber, but not only for timber. Next slide, please. This study in Central America showed that the timber alternative is a saving account strategy, with different countries having different amount of timber in their cocoa plantations. No? And this is very important to know why the differences in the different countries are. Next one. There's some lag. Uh, Next one, please. Timber is one option, but mixed system, like the ones you can find in Cameroon or in this case in Haiti, includes, along with timber, many different fruit tree species, like this example in Haiti with many different species, looking like a real agroforest now. Next one. And this mixed system have an important contribution to food security, as this study in Central America shows that how the different fruit species in cocoa plantations contribute to food security and nutrition by providing different nutrients and vitamins that are essential for the well-being of the family. Next one. Not only is the contribution of the nutrients important, also there's availability, the seasonal availability of the fruit, which is important because it can be used to avoid period of hunger or seasonal period of hunger in a farming system because fruits are delivered at different times of the year. Next, please. The, the combination of the timber and the fruits and many other products like firewood and medicines that are produced by the shade canopy really have important contributions to the livelihood strategy. In this case, the family benefit, which includes a combination of the cash flow generated by the sale of the different fruit and timber component and firewood products coming from the shade canopy, also added to the self-consumption value of all the goods that come from the cocoa plantation. In this case, we can see different designs with different complexities render or produce different amounts of fruits and bananas and timber and cacao. And all those contribute to the sale and the cash flow of the family, but also to the self-consumption. This example also shows that this idea of this middle complexity, middle shade system are perhaps the ones that we should look for, not too much shade, not too little shade, but the right combination and amount of shade will be the best strategy. Next one, please. Despite all these benefits and the products that we obtain from the cocoa plantation, the analysis really shows that most of these shade canopy designs are suboptimal in terms of how much shade and distribution, spatial distribution of the canopy cover, is even the selection of the composition of the species in the shade canopy are suboptimal to fulfill in an optimal manner the goals imposed by the farmers on this shading system. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done. Farmers can really improve the design of the shade canopy, but as we show in the next example, in the next slide, farmers need a lot of new knowledge in terms of shade management intervention. When we conducted this study in Bolivia with a very big sample of farmers, we asked them about some 21 questions that are really needed to determine what is the optimal combination of shade that you need for a particular plantation or a particular location. And we realized that the farmers knew a few of those questions, had good answers to them, but they flunked. Really, only 50% of the answer were right for most of the criteria that are needed for an optimal shade design. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of training farmers. Next, please. So this is a pending matter. We have a lot of farmer field schools focusing on the cacao itself, like how to deal with the fertilization, how to select the varieties, how to manage this pruning and grafting and all this fertilization, crop husbandry practices, but we really need to focus more on the shade tree component that is necessary. Not only farmers, but also professionals are really in lack of this integrative knowledge. Next one, please. We have a wonderful opportunity now with all these new technologies, the intelligent smartphones, and the possibility of transforming our farm and field schools that are mostly presential in meetings to go into digital farm and field schools, using more the technology, having more, how do you say that? digital animation courses so they can really access. We can reach more farmers, and also we can also link the youth that are more prone to the use of cellular phones than the older member of the family. So there's a great opportunity here to bridge the two things: the possibility of reaching more farmers, the possibility of linking more youth, and the possibility of using technology to advance the knowledge on cocoa agroforestry. Next one, please. But we have some menaces. No? We have some problems we're facing in terms of retaining agroforestry and retaining the trees in the cocoa plantations. Everything has to do with several major aspects that are taking place today that are risking the presence of the trees in the shade canopy and also the forestry solution. Next one, please. There are many things we can do, and I call it the 10 commands. We need, for example, to develop sustainable intensification approaches that consider the presence of trees in the shade canopy. Most of the intensification processes that we have seen so far, first thing they do is they remove shade. And this is something that we really have to think more carefully. What is the optimal shade that we can tolerate in a farming system to still attain high levels of crop yield? So most important, I think, is the attitude. We need to create in the farmers a view that the trees in the farm, in the shade canopy, are crops. Not only the timber, sorry for the timber, but all the shade trees. There are crops, and because of they are crops, they need to be managed like the way we try to manage our own crops, like the cocoa, in an optimal manner. We also have to work on the supportive legislation, especially for timber. There are so many regulations over the timber tree species. They are treated like trees on the forest, while in fact there are trees on the farm. They should have a different legislation for this and need to work on this particular aspect, simplify the regulations to allow farmers to harvest, transport, and use farm timber. We need to support certification schemes that promote the use of trees in cocoa. For example, we have certification for bird friendly, for sustainable cocoa. Maybe we need something about cocoa timber or something. Certification around this area much be needed. Next one, please. How to avoid declining cocoa areas, no? Because it is true that we are in expansion in some areas, but also we are decreasing cocoa plantations, agroforestry cocoa other areas, and how to balance this pressure on the cocoa. So we have, again, 5 more general recommendations. Again, increase the profitability seems to be the most important strategy that we need to follow. And then, again, work on sustainable intensification of crop husbandry, value fruit and timbers from the shade canopy, but improve the value chain for these complementary products. We have very good work on how to improve the value chain, but not so much work on how to improve the fruit value chain, which is the more difficult one, and then the timber value chain. Certification to reduce volatility and increase prices, and also probably develop some payment for ecosystem services mechanisms that are really attract farmers. Next one, please. And this is more or less what I wanted to say to you. I'm very open to questions that you may have on this particular presentation. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eduardo. That was very enlightening. And now I'm going to hand it over to you and Amulai to have a little dialogue. I think he has some questions for you. You guys can go back and forth, and I'll jump in when we have to go to our next session.
Thank you, Mr. Sambariba, for this great presentation. And the two-pronged question immediately comes to mind when we are listening to you. So, what are the biggest challenges to farmers, one, to retain agroforestry, and 2, to create new agroforestry? Thank you.
I think we have to work very much on the profitability aspect. Now, farmers are very responsive to the use value of the trees, no? And we have to focus on this. No? When I come to farmers and start talking about what they do in their cocoa plantation, they give you a full explanation of the cocoa itself, you know, the varieties, the planting, the management. But more they fail to talk about the trees. And when I corner them, asking them about the trees, they also always give you a very weak response. And I ask them, well, why don't we get rid of the trees to produce more cocoa? And they immediately react and say, no, 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 no. We use the trees because we have this for timber. This is the fruit for the family. And if I have a problem, I can harvest this tree and sell the timber. And so this is, I can cope with unexpected demand. So it is in the back of their mind. But I think what is important is to put this value that they already obtain and can be improved by legislation, by value change development, by optimization of the shade canopy. When you put this value in front of them and ask them and somehow motivate them to treat them as particular crops, then the possibility for retaining in the farm will increase dramatically. So valuing and visibility is important.
Thank you. Then is agroforestry farmer-centric then?
My main argument in this presentation, yes. Obviously, there are differences between countries. We see in the main cocoa produced in Cote d'Ivoire, this large fraction of the cacao is grown up in sun. And I understand now there is strong value and strong processes to put the trees back into the system. And this offers a great opportunity because then we can start from optimal system from the very beginning. We have to start question about which species where, how to space them, what kind of characteristics, physiological and morphological, this species should have so that the trade-off with cacao production are minimized. Farmers use the trees, they have the trees in many other places. And now we are seeing farmers that don't have the trees with the idea of putting trees back into the cocoa plantation. So I see, yes, trees as central to farmers' strategy, and agroforestry always will be a farmer-centric strategy as well.
Thank you. But what is lacking? How do we ensure extension starts to provide guidance on the non-cocoa agroforestry component?
This is an important issue. I think if you look at the extension services, I think we have to start from the university system. We have to work immediately with the farmer field school program to include appropriate curricula in terms of shade management and create this silvicultural culture in the farmer family members so they can start talking about how to manage a tree, you know, how to prune them, how many trees, how to regulate, how to decide on the planting density and displacing pattern, how is shade affecting the crop and how to can be measured. We can do that in the farm field school. But I think the important aspect has to be complemented with work at the university level and the academic level, because these extension agents that come to the farmers fields, they don't have this information in their mindset. No, they have been they have not been exposed to these technologies, to these approaches. So when they come to the farm, they just focus on one particular component of the system. I think this has to be at least two-pronged strategy. Go directly to the farm field school, but also at the academic level to ensure that the extension agent have this information in their mind when they go to the farm.
Oh, Amola, you're muted, my dear. Can you?
Okay.
There you go.
sorry about that. Thank you. Let's talk about laws now, and we have a few questions in the chat about that also. In West Africa, and I'm based in Cote d'Ivoire, timber laws and rights are a problem in promoting agroforestry. So, if timber, what can you say about that?
Well, this is a tough one, no? And it's also country dependent. No? Every country will have their particular characteristics, so there are no one fit all rule, no? By everywhere. In America, we have a little bit more freedom to manage the timber trees, but still we complain here in Latin America that there is not enough, that you need to do more. And it's evident that on farm are really invisible. They're not in the, in most of the country, they don't have a specific law for trees on farm. So they are regulated like they were trees in the forest, over-regulated. So that stimulates illegal trading of the timber. So with negative impacts on the income for farmers. They are not in the institutional setting where in the Ministry of Agriculture you go to talk about trees on the farm. They will send you to the Ministry of Forestry, and you go to the Ministry of Forest, they talk about the trees, but they don't talk about the trees on the farm. So there's a limbo there. So it's not in the law, it's not in the institution, and because it's not so visible, it is not in the policy. Public policy or private policy. Now we're seeing changes, but this is something that needs to be worked out, specifically country by country. In Africa, it's a little bit more complicated, and we see, for example, in the Caribbean region in Latin America, also very complicated. No, there are so many restringent regulations about the use of timber in the farm that farmers really rely only on fruit trees as a part of the farming system. So we need to do a lot of work on the legislation to make them more visible, have legislation and also institution and policy that really support the planting, the use, and the transportation of these, the timber tree, for example.
Thank you. And my last question, and then you will be able to see what you would like to add to this wonderful presentation. What are the most important issues for farmers? To finish my question.
I think the most important aspect is that the farmers should realize that the trees are crops. And once they start thinking of the trees as crops, the way they think of the cacao as a crop, they will start thinking about the best species, the best management, and how to make the best out of them. And once they do this, they will be more willing to retain or to plant trees in their farming system, no? Provided that we already all some alternatives and ideas on how to do this in the best way possible. So to me, it's change on the mindset of the farmer, which is really needed in this particular respect, to make the trees visible here in the head and think of them about crops, not only trees that, you know, nature. That would be my main recommendation for that.
Anything we
Thank you
missed
for
and
your
you would like
questions.
to add? Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I am very excited because I see that agroforestry is coming to the front of the discussion, the conversation, that the industry is also convinced that this is a good strategy to go. Farmers are ready to take up all the innovations and recommendations to ensure that they make the full benefit of the coffee and the cocoa and the shade trees for their family. So I think it's a wonderful time in which we are living now. And I hope this will only accelerate in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Aitel, you have the floor.
Wonderful. A big debt of gratitude to the two of you. And Molay, thank you so much for stepping in when Warren Sacco, the president of the Cocoa Farmers Association, at the last minute could not come. We're so grateful to you. And Eduardo, what a wonderful presentation that really lays out so much food for thought and I think kicks us off in a really fantastic way for today. We are running a little bit late, so I'm just going to skip our break and go straight into our next panel to make up for lost time. Our first panel of today is called Cocoa, Agroforestry, and Food Security, as well as Income Diversification. We have a small change to the program as well for this panel. At the last minute, François Ruff was not able to moderate, so we have Anthony Fountain as a moderator. Most of you probably need no introduction to Anthony, who is present in almost every single major sustainability event for cocoa for the last couple decades, because he is one of the leading voices in civil society for sustainable cocoa. Anthony is the managing director of the Voice Network, which is a coalition of NGOs and trade unions throughout Europe and the US working on sustainable cocoa value chains. You probably all know Anthony also because he's the co-author of the Cocoa Barometers, which come out regularly and are in many people's minds the Bibles of research on sustainability in cocoa. Anthony acts as one of the key spokespersons for civil society working for a more ethical cocoa industry. And he's been actively advocating a sustainable cocoa sector for more than a decade, with a huge focus on living income, minimum price, farmer well-being, as well as now agroforestry. He was one of the folks within Voice who led the creation of the Voice position paper on cocoa agroforestry. Previously, he was the co-founder and director of Stop the Traffic in the Netherlands. And before that, he was coordinator of the 10 campaign, which is a global cooperation of NGOs and trade unions calling for legislation and enforcement to end the worst forms of abuses in the cocoa sector. So Anthony, you who've been thinking about farmer well-being and about human rights in cocoa and about social justice in cocoa for many decades, I think it's very fitting that you help kick us off for this panel. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you very much for this glowing introduction, Etel. I'm sure that it's far too much credit. So I have come in here rather last minute, which means I haven't had the time to prepare the panelists for what we're going to be doing. We are short on time, which means I'm going to be trying to keep quite a tight schedule here. We have a variety of speakers today in this panel, and what we're going to do is everyone's going to have 5 minutes to start with some key talking points, after which we will still have some time for questions and answers. Now, I mentioned this beforehand because the questions and answers will come from you. And so I'd like to ask you to bring, and with you, I mean the listeners, so the participants to today's conference, please put the questions that you would like to have us discuss in the Q&A. Now, at the bottom of your screen, you can see Q&A and chat. If you put your questions in the chat, we will not see them and we will not be able to ask them. If you put them in the Q&A, we will be able to see them and we'll be able to answer them. Some of these will be answered in the conversation. Some of these will be answered in writing. However, we will try to answer all of your questions. So if you have questions to the speakers during this conversation, then please put them in the Q&A. Now, we have a really great variety of speakers in this panel today. We have Bashiratou Kamal from Gawu in Ghana. We have Antoine Ambert from Alter Eco. We have Denis Sonnois from CGIIR. And we have Emma Harbour from Rainforest Alliance. Now, before I let them all speak, I will give them a short introduction each, and then we will ask them all to kick off with a short 5-minute presentation. Now, when I say 5 minutes, I mean 5 minutes. I don't mean 5.5, I don't mean 7, and I certainly don't mean 15. So at 4 minutes, I will give all of the speakers a 1-minute warning, and at 5 minutes, I will say your time is up. So please keep yourself to the timing, and I'm asking all of the speakers to turn their cameras on now as well. The first speaker we have is Bashiratou Kamal, who is the Gender Equality Officer and Training Education Officer of the General Agricultural Workers Union in Ghana. And this union protects interests of workers and rural people and promotes sustainable development throughout a wide variety of sectors in Ghana. Bashiratou specializes in labor and global workers' rights and has a passion for working on women, youth, and children's issues. She's also been active in helping provide alternative livelihoods for women in 20 communities in Ghana, and was part of a team that worked on withdrawal of about 3,000 children from child labor. So she comes here with a very broad sense of expertise and experience and authority to speak on this in the cocoa sector. Now, the second speaker that we will have is Antoine Humbert, who is the Senior Director of Innovation and Sustainability at the chocolate company Alter Eco. He's an entrepreneur and a mission-driven executive, and he is passionate about clean-labeled sustainable foods targeting conscious consumers. And as the longest standing employee at Alter Eco, he has over 9 years of experience of leading marketing, branding, and innovation efforts at this fast growing and award winning organic and fair trade company. And Antoine's specific focus within this conversation is around his work leading Alter Eco's efforts on regenerative agriculture. The third speaker we have today is Denis Saunois. He is a senior scientist at the Center for International Forestry Research. And since 1997, Denis has researched natural resource management in the humid forest landscapes of both West and Central Africa, with a focus specifically on cocoa agroforests, agriculture forests, and climate change mitigation and adaptation. He's a prolific author on cocoa agroforestry, and before this, he taught at the Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. And then the last speaker that we have is Emma Harbour, who is Rainforest Alliance Director of Advocacy, and she oversees there the advocacy and policy work worldwide, engaging with public and private sector policymakers to help create more enabling environments for sustainable supply chains to flourish. With an international career in development and sustainability, Emma has advocated with policymakers on issues including gender equity, livelihoods, and sustainable supply chains for a long time now. And previously, she led global campaigns on poverty reduction, equitable value distribution, and women's rights. Now, in a normal place, this would have been the place where our four speakers would have joined us on stage and we would have all clapped. And we are all looking forward to the time where we can do that again. But until that time, we are going to have to do it with computer screens and microphones. So we are very happy that this means that we can have people from all over the world joining us with a much lower threshold than back when we still all had to pay for airline flights and hotel rooms. So this is actually, it's creating a lot more ability for so many more people to join. And that's essential when we're talking about the topic that we are looking at in this session, where we're looking at how can agroforestry systems diversify the income and food security of farmers? How can they provide a buffer against fluctuations in the markets and in production circumstances? But also very much, how can agroforestry systems be designed together with farmers and people within the community so that it better meets their needs? And how can local adoption and retention of agroforestry, how can we make sure that farmers perceive value in this and receive value from it? And I think that those two are directly connected. They will perceive and receive value if they are involved in this. And so therefore, it's really important that we make the threshold of engagement as low as possible. So I'm really happy that we've been able to bring people together from all over the world in this. And we've also got some cocoa farmers in the conversation today, and I've been asked to provide some space for that in the Q&A immediately after the four presentations. So we will start with that as soon as we've had the four presentations. Now, you have had a lot of introduction, and now it is time to get to the meat of the matter. And so without further ado, I would like to ask Bashiratu to give her 5 minutes of introduction into these key issues of how agroforestry systems can diversify and strengthen and make more resilient farmer incomes, and how we make farmers more involved in the setup of this process. Take it away, Bashiratu.
Thank you so much, Antonio. I will briefly go to a presentation that I prepared for the session. As has been mentioned, I work with a labor union that organizes workers in the agricultural sector. So we do engage with farmers on different levels as well. So I work with a union, the General Agricultural Workers Union of the TUC Ghana, which is 60 years old. And we organize both in the formal and the informal sector of the agricultural value chain. And in the formal sector, I actually mean where workers work 8 hours in a day, and it includes workers in the cocoa sector. So staff of Ghana Cocoa Board, specifically Cocoa Health and Extension Division and Seed Production Division, and some workers of the Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana. And in the informal sector, we do organize on community basis and individual farmers, including cocoa farmers. And we have different departments talking about training and education. We have Right in Work that does work around workers' rights. And also we have the Rural Workers Organization Program that deals specifically with informal workers. Our focus is on policy advocacy and campaign for workers with government and policymakers, and also with employers, and also in representing workers at negotiation table on different things, and also providing educational services. I, like Antonio mentioned, I work on labor and gender issues specifically because that's my specialization. I do training and education for workers, and also making sure that policies and legislations are in its very simple form for farmers to be able to understand, and also for workers to be able to understand. So basically, these are some of the pictures of what we do. And as part of our work, we know that a child in work is an adult out of work. So we also do work around child labor issues. My area of research is mainly centered around gender and labor, gender and politics, and also women's issues at the workplace, and also in the broader spheres. So some of the agroforest services that we know that Cocoa Board provides, and also with interaction with some of our members who are also in the leadership positions, include, we know, the supply of trees to farmers. And with trees, we mean that they need to be sure that whatever the farmer is planting, it's something that is not going to be detrimental to the growth and also to the farm as well. And then encouragement of farmers to do intercropping, so that one, we know the time span that cocoa takes to grow, and before then, farmers still need to eat. So they encourage them to do intercropping, which also have other benefits for farmers. And also one other thing is something that is called in the local palace proca, which is no tillage. So the encouragement of farmers to stop the slash and burn, for them to go into no tillage, where after clearing the farm and everything, they leave everything on the farm, also as a means of fertilizing the soil. Then services including education and sensitization of farmers generally in communities. One, it's also important because farmers do take information from themselves. So the information that is given to farmers by extension services personnel is different from what might be given to them by their co-farmers or other people within the community. So it's important to give farmers a technical training by a technical person who understands the issue and is able to let the information be in a form which is very easy for them to understand. And the importance of this includes the provision of shade, which has been mentioned by the keynote speaker, and also the generation of extra income for the farmers and their family, and also for food security purposes in their community, and also for themselves in their homes. If you are able to grow like cocoyam, contomere, and other things for yourself to be able to feed whilst you farm. And then also in terms of taking care of the soil, which is also very important. We all know what climate change is doing to all of us now. So it's important that we find local ways of ensuring that we do preserve the soil to its best form. Some general issues in pollination that have been noted have the issue around occupational safety and health of farmers in the farm, and also mainly issues around distance from harvesting places to the roadside, where some of the workers have does complain about a very long distance trip. And also because of the issue around Galamsey, I'm sure most of you have heard about illegal mining. And one of the workers did tell me that she did she fell in a pothole, and also in a pit that had been dug and not covered. So all these are things that goes against workers. And issues around their eyes, if there is the farm is very crowded, and there are also other issues around spraying. And when the farmers are not following the set rules, especially during spraying, it's also a problem. Then long-standing, that is waste.
Bashiratu, you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. So, and also issues with carrying heavy loads, which Gawu also does education on. And then 10 years ago, according to farmers, the climate was better, so it helped in harvesting. Then the changes in climate, which is affecting workers now, and also affecting the shortage of flowers. Then some results have been Cocoa Board trying its best to encourage irrigation on farms and also digging wells, especially for the seed production division. Then in terms of income diversification, introduction of non-farm economic activities and intercropping. So for the non-farm economic activity, for instance, Gawu itself has taught farmers how to use some of the waste product from cocoa to make soap, local soap and other things for sale so that they can make extra income. Then implication for food security, which is my last slide, it affects livelihood of workers and also job and income security. Then there is also implication for seedling supply for farmers and destruction of farmlands when farmers do not follow it, and especially with activities of illegal miners as well. Then also, which also translates to the destruction of water bodies because of the use of mercury, which also in turn affects food because of the mercury and the water. So if farmers end up using the same water, then it's going to affect it. And we all know what is happening to the water bodies of Ghana now. Then there's also the issue of a high cost of food as a result of that. And then migration into other lucrative work if they are having issues with the farm and also with galamsey, which is illegal mining and water bodies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bashiratu, for this very clear outline of what this practice looks like on the ground in Ghana. And thank you also very much for sticking to the time. And I'd like to ask the other panelists to follow Bashiratu's example in that so that we have time to answer the questions of the audience. Now, I'm seeing some questions starting to come in through the Q&As. Please keep the questions coming. And if you have specific questions to specific speakers, don't hesitate to mention them by name, and we will try to see how many of those we can do. So thank you, Bashiratu Kamal from the Ghanaian Agricultural Workers Union. And now I'd like to give the floor to Antoine Ambert from Alter Eco. Antoine, take it away.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Etel, and the organizers for such a wonderful conference and for inviting me. It's been very inspiring to see every stakeholder talk and come together. It looks like a real change is happening. So we are Alter Eco. We're an organic and fair trade chocolate company. And what you see on the slide is our best-selling chocolate bar, or 85%. And as you can see, we've decided to take a risk. We have put our values on the front of pack. We put an image of a cocoa tree grown in dynamic agroforestry next to a banana plant on the front of pack. Our consumer studies have shown us that chocolate consumers are not really making purchasing decisions based on sustainability, and that they are not specifically loyal consumers to one specific brand. They move from one brand to another, but we also have seen that it mattered a lot, that sustainability in cocoa today mattered a lot for our planet, for farmers, and therefore our conclusion was to still lead with our values, but be extremely clear about why it matters and make it very easy for consumers to understand what that meant. And that's why we put that photo on the front of pack and that message around restoring for us. So while sustainability is not a purchasing driver yet in cocoa, we believe also consumers care every month a bit more about our planet, about inequality, about climate change, and then they will remember a bit stronger every time that what are the brands that actually share those concerns and who are part of the solution. The other thing I wanted to mention about Alter Eco is that we are a fair trade company since day one, working directly with small scale farmers in Ecuador, Dominican Republic, Peru, but also working with quinoa farmers in Bolivia or dairy farmers in Switzerland. And one common ground that I've seen visiting all those farmers is really that low input farming, which is one of the principles of agroforestry, really reduces dependency on external resources like chemicals, pesticides, fertilizers, livestock feed, water. And farmers, while going into a model like agroforestry, a low input farming, organic agroforestry, sometimes see their revenues go down because there's a bit less yield, a bit less production, but they see their costs go down even further and overall increase their profit. And more importantly, their resiliency in front of market fluctuations and predictable weather patterns. And it was pretty powerful for me to hear a Swiss farmer, grass-fed dairy farmer in Switzerland, use similar words to a cocoa farmer in Ecuador. It showed that regenerative models like agroforestry are really replicable all across the globe and in cocoa industry and beyond. Then I wanted to show you concretely what are we doing at Alter Eco in agroforestry. So here on the right side is a photo of one of a parcel in Ecuador that has been transitioned since 2015. Our Swiss chocolatier Halba and Petra Hyde, who was one of the panelists on Tuesday AM, studied an ambitious dynamic agroforestry program back again in 2015 to transition 400 farmers with the co-op called Uno Case. We are now very enthusiastic at Alter Eco to co-finance this program for the coming 4 years and transition another 400 farmers. And now we talked about the adoption, the introduction, the word of mouth is really working, and the fact that there's 400 hectares already transition, neighbors can come and visit them and really take part of the next phase. This is in the Dominican Republic at a cooperative called CoProAgro. This is we visited them March 2020, and those 30 farmers were introduced for the first time to the model. And here what was interesting to hear is comments such as, oh, I have an avocado tree next to my cocoa tree and it's doing great. I'm kind of used to 1 or 2 different species next to my cocoa tree. We were presenting a model with 15, very dynamic agroforestry. And that's when the surprise was for farmers, but there was a ground, right, to really start building and working together with the farmers to make it even more dynamic. And that's really the challenge today, especially in the Dominican Republic. Here also in the Dominican Republic, this photo shows how much training matters. And the person doing the training is Esteban, is an agronomist hired by the cooperative, and that's a model we really believe in, is working with cooperative of farmers who are really that vehicle to implement the program and work with farmers locally, and also have someone on site who is available as the knowledge to the members all the time. And the other model that we've developed is train the trainers.
1 minute left.
Perfect. Train the trainers, and those trainers are trained by experts. We partner with an agency called EcoTop, Joachim Mills and Walter Yana, that you may know. And one aspect I wanted to mention, now that the training exists, the seedlings are provided for free, is really what's left on the farmer is the management of the parcel. This is pruning. This was also pictures taken in Ecuador. Pruning is important. Joanna Jacobi was one of your panelists mentioning in one of her studies, if the parcels are not managed properly, then the model doesn't work. I'll finish with this. We decided last fall to launch the Earthworm Foundation to really provide that cost to entry, which is really high, which is the ceilings, the training, have that free money come in, so that then once the farmers are transitioned, the model actually works. There is an increase of revenue that we estimate about 20%. And really what we need as governments, institutions, and foundations is really to focus on that kickoff, how to transition farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antoine, for, again, a very practical outline of what's going on, this time largely from Latin America, showing some real images as well of what it looks like when you move from monoculture to a diverse, dynamic agroforestry system. Thank you so much for that. Without any further ado, please do keep your questions coming in the Q&A, but we will go on to Dennis Sonwa, Senior Scientist at the Center for International Forest Research. Your time starts now, Dennis. Thank you. I'm afraid your microphone is still muted, Dennis. Perhaps you can.
Sorry. Okay, I hope it's okay now. So I'm really happy to. Okay, I'm really happy to be part of this panel to share my reflection on food security and then livelihood diversification. Next slide, please. So what I will do is
Can we pause for 1 second, Dennis?
Yes.
I'm going to take over the translation for our poor translator, Justin, who filled in for somebody who went missing. So just give us 1 second so that the person in charge of the admin can put me as a translator, and I'll be translating the rest of the panel to give our translator.
Okay, so just let me know when.
Okay, Andrea will tell you because I'm going to vanish from this. Thank you.
You should be ready, Atel. Go ahead, Dennis. Thank you.
Okay, so I was saying that I will come back to, I will say, the cocoa agroforest definition, and then I will continue with food security, livelihood, and then I will end with some word of the conclusion. Next slide, please. So in terms of cocoa agroforest, we could say that cocoa agroforest is really a mixture of cocoa tree with associated plant, But what we need to have in mind is the fact that when we say cocoa agroforest, we have different types of cocoa agroforest. And then it moves from the simple one to the complex one. And then we could say that the good one is the one that really mimic, I would say, local primary or secondary forest. And then what you generally have, the typology that you have outside there is really a balance between, I would say, farmer knowledge, extension services advice, but also sometimes local regulation, as we hear from the previous presentation. When the farm is generally settled, the main purpose is really to produce cocoa beans, but the fact that you have associated plant within the system provides some sort of plurality of products and services that bring additional opportunity to farmer. Additionally to farmer can have, I would say, product, but also to the society. And then society generally have what we call ecological services, like, let's say, biodiversity conservation and carbon sequestration. So the key challenge is generally how you transform, I would say, the ecological diversity to biological resources that can be useful to the farmer now. So each product and service of the cocoa agroforest generally have a food security and livelihood dimension that can be stimulated for the sustainable rural health. Next slide, please. So in terms of the food security, we could say that the one-time, let's say, cash that you have from cocoa is generally complemented by the continuous and diverse income that farmer can have by selling product. And then this is very useful because those money from associated plant can come in different moments of the year. So the next step in terms of the food security after the, let's say, the catch, is the fact that farmer can use direct consumption. Farmer can directly consume products that are coming from the agroforest. From the presentation of Eduardo, I think you have an idea of the importance in terms of the vitamin and so on that you could have from those plants. And then those plants then can complement the staple food that you generally have in the local food system. More importantly is the fact that the cocoa agroforest can really help to provide some of the wild food that generally found in the remote forest. Because we need to remember that in those landscapes where we don't have cocoa, the mainland use or the mainland cover were generally forests, and then farmers used to go in those forests to have some of their product. So when you have a system where monoculture is really promoted, you may lose some of those forest products. So another important aspect is the fact that cocoa agroforests provide ecological services such as climate change regulation and then pollination that are useful for the local food production. So you could say that in their way, the cocoa agroforests are contributing to strengthen the food access and then availability in the rural area. Next slide, please.
Dennis, you have 1 minute left.
Okay, so we could, in terms of the livelihood, we could say that the tree that grow under cocoa agroforest generally can stay longer, and then this is very useful in terms of the long-term financial sustainability. And then associated plant, as we see, can provide, I would say, continuous catch that are useful to farmer subsistence and then are also useful for the local market. The fact that women and children are involved in catch-end activity provides some sort of the balance in the household power. And then associated plants are useful, I would say, in house construction, rural diet, and local health system. So many cocoa agroforestry provide, I would say, a range of species and eco-services that are useful for the rural area. So cocoa agroforests are really contributing to expansion of non-income and then income earning possibility. And then the last slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So in terms of the conclusion and way forward, you could say that the mixture of the cocoa tree with associated plant are leading to the multiple products and services. And then the food and livelihood dimension related to this are stimulating positive socioeconomic and ecological dynamic in the cocoa landscape. And then this cocoa agroforest sector are part of emerging forest-related bioeconomy in the tropics. And then if complex cocoa agroforest is promoted, the zero deforestation dynamic can legitimately be synergized with zero hunger and zero poverty target in rural area. So the sustainability of the cocoa or chocolate sphere depends on the dynamics of the cocoa agroforest, which for the moment support the food security and then the diverse livelihood of farmer in rural area. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for this very clear and very wide-ranging outline of the possibilities specifically for diversified livelihoods and agroforestry. Then we'll go to the last speaker, after which I will provide Chief Nana Kwesi with some time to provide his thoughts as well. So the last speaker is Emma Harbour from Rainforest Alliance. Emma, your time starts now.
Thank you, Anthony. So for those of you who are not familiar with Rainforest Alliance, we have a long history of working at the intersect of business and agriculture. And I think that is why it's particularly apt to be talking about agroforestry today, as it's really where we see the need to transform agricultural practices to restore and conserve biodiversity, increase resilience to climate change, but also improve livelihoods and resilience and tackle gender equality coming together, and where businesses can play a really critical role in helping that transition, as Antoine mentioned in his presentation. And yet we see that there are a number of barriers to overcome. So as Rainforest Alliance, we have taken an approach to include agroforestry in our agricultural standard moving forward, with the aim to ensure that it is of the greatest benefit to the producer themselves. So when we look at, can agroforestry tackle food security? Yes, but enabling producers to understand the context they're in and the trade-offs that are involved in taking that step is really critical. So how have we looked to do that? Well, first and foremost, within our new standard, we have included agroforestry as one of our core criteria. That means that alongside other interventions like conservation areas and windbreaks and living fences, agroforestry is one of the core areas to look at in meeting the standard. We believe that every Rainforest Alliance certified farm should have a minimum amount of natural vegetation. And in the case of cocoa and other shade tolerant crops, we have a minimum amount of 15% required in order to meet the standard. In addition, we've been working with scientific research organisations and national institutions to define the optimal shade parameters and have developed guidance on assessing the area under natural vegetation on the farm and the shade tree cover at plot level, which allows producers, if there are no national recommendations for agroforestry, to have guidelines to look at how they can best implement that on their farm. In the West African cocoa setting, for example, we see the optimal shade covering being around 30%, which if we look at the earlier graph from Eduardo, is higher than what we see at the moment in both Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. Coupled with this is obviously critically the training and the extension work that goes with being able to implement the standard. And that includes topics that we've already touched on, things like pruning, being able to ensure that an agroforestry approach really works for the producers. However, what I'm sure we're all aware of is that these kinds of transitions are costly, both in resources and time. And we're looking at a sector which sees producers short on both of those. So we're also looking at what goes on around the standard and around the farm itself. And that means we need to be smart about our approach. One size fits all will not bring benefits to all. And it's actually likely to dissuade producers and governments and the sector from investing and taking those actions. So we think there are three critical pieces in this puzzle. The first is contextualization. We need to understand the challenges and the opportunities. And we have taken steps to help build that understanding through climate risk maps, providing a clearer understanding of the impact climate change is having and the types of adaptation strategies that can be used, of which agroforestry can be one. This is both beneficial to the producer, who can then start to make more informed decisions about their plot. It can also help connect to the supply chain to look to really drive investment in the right areas. And it can link to governmental policy making to really ensure that a biodiverse impact is being rewarded through policy. we've already found that in Ghana,
minute, Emma.
We already found in Ghana that increasing or decreasing shade cover based on these risk maps have allowed producers to deal much more effectively with drought or soil degradation. Secondly, and it's also been touched on, is the enabling environment. If the laws are not there to ensure tree ownership, or if women cannot own land, then we don't see the benefits strongly. So we work with local partners on looking at how we can create that enabling environment through policy. And finally, investment is really key. Sorry, I was muted as well. So finally, investment. These transitions costly and require longer term planning. And that's where the supply chain and governments need to come in. We really need to look at that shared responsibility that ensures that producers who are at the front line and who can take these steps to create a more agroforestry approach and see the benefits can also be supported in doing that. So working with governments to look at how to incentivize an ecosystem approach is critical, but also so is the role of supply chain actors. Investing, supporting farmers and ensuring that they can make that transition and they can make that transition on their own terms with their own knowledge is critical and is part of the approach that we're taking as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Emma. Right, I want to thank everyone for their time so far. I'm just going to ask a question to the organizers to make sure that they can give me a signal to say how much time we have left for this Q&A, because we are running behind on time. Before we go into the questions from the audience, though, I want to make sure that we now switch to a cocoa producer himself. We have Chief Nana Kwesi Benia II, who is the chief of Sefwi Adumam in Juaboso district, a cocoa production stronghold in Ghana. Chief Nana Kwesi, are you there and can you hear me? I think your microphone is muted right now.
Yes, please, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to ask you to just give a brief reflection on what you've heard so far and specifically look at the key question that is there is, how does local adoption of agroforestry, how are you doing that within your community, and how do farmers perceive the value of agroforestry, and how do you actually receive the value from agroforestry systems for your farmers?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, how we combine the two is we plant the cocoa, then we add the trees, seedlings in addition. So as and when the trees are growing, then the cocoa tree also grows as well. So this is how we are doing it. And we also include foodstuffs like cocoyam, plantain, cassava in addition, so that before we can get the cocoa beans, we get the food, we sell some, and then we also, get some to eat, so that it will sustain us until the time 4 or 5 years before the cocoa starts producing. So this is how we go about doing it. And in addition, what we the farmers are agitating is that, in fact, we are in the cocoa sectors doing the cocoa for the big companies to buy and then make profit out of that. But when we come to our communities, the life of the farmers or the livelihood of the farmers are very poor. We are very, very poor. We want money so that we can use to educate our children or, the family, and then at least to make our living better. But we are not getting it. So we are appealing to the companies, the big companies in abroad, Europe and so on, that they should come to our aid, give us some soft loans, and then so that we can use it to do the farming properly. And also the profit that you people are getting out of the cocoa beans, please at least, if not at all, you can give us 200 to 300% out of the profit so that it will boost our morale to do it. So when the old ones are not there, the younger ones will also, take up from there. It will encourage them to also do the work for us.
Thank you very much, Chief Nanakwesi. That's very valuable. I think that what you're saying here really brings in a microcosm the challenges, but also the opportunities when we talk about agroforestry, especially when you're looking at cocoa as a tree crop. It takes several years before it can start providing income. And at the same time, there will be a need for resilience against market crashes and market developments, and other income through agroforestry can help there. But there are major obstacles for farmers who are often quite not the strongest market actors, so to speak. They don't have the highest bargaining power. So there's a responsibility for others in the supply chain to pick that up. Now, I'm just going to ask, I've got time for one quick question for every panelist just about. So let me start moving this on to Antoine. When you help your farmers in Latin America to switch to these dynamic agroforestry systems, what is the role of Alter Eco in providing support to farmers to doing this, both in access to market for the diversified products, but also perhaps in helping pre-finance or make it possible for this to happen? What do you do there? And a very quick answer there, please.
Yeah, I mean, the first, there's definitely other partners involved. The co-op itself, again, our chocolatier right now, the idea for the foundation is to have money available for training for seedlings, but also now as we look at new grantees, is there are projects that, for example, could build a small warehouse and small processing equipment for additional crops so that those crops can be sold beyond the local market, potentially to export. And we've learned that a small processing that's now missing could really expand market access by a lot, and with that additional income for the farmers. So looking at those pain points of where can income be increased now that the model itself is implemented.
Thank you very much, Antoine. Then I've got a question, and I think, Dennis, this is probably one that's best suited for you. Maartje de Graaf from Tropenbos International asks, if income from timber is an important motivator for farmers to plant trees, are we confident that these farmers will be able to reap the benefits in the long term? And if we do know that they will be able to reap the benefits, many of the trees that are planted today will be cleared again in the coming decades. And so are the landscape actors sufficiently aware of sustainable agroforestry practices, including replanting?
Yes, I think in terms of timber, from the previous presentation that Eduardo made, and then the discussion that followed, you really understand that timber planting is at the center of, I would say, preoccupation, but at the same time, there is a need of, I would say, providing some sort of enable environment that can be useful for the, for the planting of the timber, because in many of the, because I made my presentation, for example, based on my experience in West and Central Africa. And then if you take the case of Cameroon, for example, farmer do not necessarily own the tree that are on his farm. And then he needs to prove that he has planted that tree and so on. So in terms of regulation, as Eduardo was saying, there is a gap that need to improve to make in such a way that the potential that timber have will also be useful to the farmer. I think that there is a work there to do in such a way that resources, I would say that biological resources can, that biological product can become a resources to the farmer. So there is a work to do there. Over.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Antoine, maybe to add, excuse me.
Yes, very short, because we're running out of time.
Yes. In my presentation, I would say link to publication. So those who want detail of what I say could have it, can have it, I would say, within the slide. I put the link in each of the slide. Over.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And we will make sure that, or the conference will make sure that all the presentations and documentation will be available after the conference. And I think all of these sessions will be published as YouTube films as well for those that want to go back in detail. Bashiratu, a question for you. In your work, you've spent a lot of time also looking at gender equality within this. And so when we're talking about making sure that farmers are involved in these agroforestry systems and they're incentivized into this, are there specific challenges in making sure that that women also are the head of households, etc.? Do we need special interventions to make sure that there's also gender equality in approaches to agroforestry and diversified income systems?
Well, I think that most important to note is that as a country, Ghana has several policies that aims to promote gender equality and equity in everything. And at the base of this is also the fact that the trade unions are also promoting this and in working with the partners. So we build structures both from the local to the national level that ensures the integration of women in everything that we do. And we do also promote positive discrimination, which is affirmative action, to make sure that in most instances, when services are to be provided, knowing very well that women's strengths are not always up to that of their male counterpart, we make conscious effort to make sure that they get services, special services, and their quota systems that we also promote for them, to make sure that if their strengths are not able to be that of the men, they are able to also balance it in that instance. So for instance, we do have extension service providers who are women who are also paying special attention to women farmers especially, and also their male counterparts also do the same, but they are also, especially when it has to also do with the time that women get to go to the farm and the issues around unpaid care services as well. Yeah.
Very clear. Thank you so much, Bashiratu. And then I'm going to go to my last question because we've run out of time. And in fact, we started late, so we're ending late. But Emma, from a rainforest perspective, what is the biggest thing that you can do to strengthen not just the adoption of agroforestry, but to actually strengthen a continuous process of more dynamic, more diverse agroforestry, going from kind of 1 or 2 additional crops to continuously kind of the way Antoine's presentation called it, farm like a forest principle? What's the main thing that a standard like rainforest can do to help farmers in that?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I think one of the key things is really looking at this from a landscape level. So I think it's been touched on a few times around giving the value to more than just the cocoa crop. So can we start to take what we've used within a sector approach through Rainforest Alliance and look at that within a landscape and partner with others to ensure there are access to market for some of those other trees and crops, and really kind of take that model of investment through the chain and sort of forward support so that can kind of be built out through that. And I think it's only when you start to look at it from a broader spectrum and not just through one cash crop that you're really going to see that full transition to a much more healthier agroforestry approach.
Thank you so much, Emma. I wish we had more time for this, but you know, this is a 3-day conference with a lot of different panels and a lot of different approaches. So everyone that is here, thank you so much for your time, for your engaged questions as well. I wish we'd had more time to answer more of those. I would very much like to thank all of the panelists, Chief Nana Kwesi Bedi, Bashiratu Kamal from Gawu, Dennis Sonwa, Emma Harbour, and Antoine Ambert for their excellent presentations here. I'm going to now let the word to Etel, who looks quite excited to be back and able to speak again. So Etel, thank you so much. Now your microphone is probably still in translation mode, so we cannot hear you. I can see you speak, but I cannot hear you speak. So someone will have to transfer you from...
I think I've come back from interpretation to the English
Yes, you are back.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anthony, for a wonderful moderation. And my thanks go out to Chief Nana Kwesi and all of our wonderful panelists. That was extremely enriching. You gave us all these different ideas about how we can do better and more diverse and more enriching cocoa agroforestry that puts farmers at the heart of everything, that empowers them, and that brings food security, income diversification, and also a stabilization of income throughout time. That was a really interesting thing that I heard, was not only bringing in different sources of revenue that different crops yield at different times of year, so you're really stabilizing the farm financial package. So wonderful interventions. We all learned so much from you. We are running a little bit over time. Sorry about that. There were so many last minute switches of people canceling and having to be replaced. We're going to take a 2-minute break only instead of a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back to our next panel. Our moderator for that panel is Ruth McLean from the New York Times. She's the West Africa Bureau Chief. And our next panel is about pest control. So everybody take a 2-minute break and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Aujourd'hui, on est face à la problématique de l'invasion des forêts classées, donc en particulier la forêt classée de Cavally. Alors que faire? Si on sort toutes ces personnes qui sont dans la forêt classée aujourd'hui sans mesure d'accompagnement, on risque d'être confronté demain à la perte de notre rang de premier producteur mondial de cacao. Mais ce n'est pas seulement ça, c'est un manque à gagner au niveau de l'économie ivoirienne. Pour nous, il faut préserver ces forêts-là parce que c'est ces forêts qui vont justement permettre au cacao à l'extérieur en fait, de pouvoir continuer à produire. Parce que s'il n'y a pas de forêt, il n'y aura pas de cacao. Donc, quelque part, on est dans l'obligation en fait, de préserver ces zones de forêt pour pouvoir continuer à avoir la pluie, pour pouvoir continuer à avoir les sols fertiles.
Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, we have a wonderful video from Earthworm Foundation about their work on cocoa agroforestry systems, and that will play at the end of the conference since we lost a little bit of time earlier this morning. And right now it gives me great pleasure to transition us over to the next panel. The next panel is a really important one. This is about disease and pest control and how that fits into the cocoa agroforestry perspective. In a way, the stakes are so high, right? Because often when you have cocoa diseases, we've seen them sweep through Brazil, Ghana, many different cocoa producing countries with devastating effect for farmer livelihoods, but actually for entire regions, even countries, economies, really experiencing a tremendous threat from the loss of one of the key sources of income for the economy. So this is a sort of existential socioeconomic threat, but we also know, of course, that when one controls pests through chemicals, we are contributing to the insect apocalypse. We are contributing to mass extinction. So in a way, we're between a rock and a hard place, between Scylla and Charybdis. This is an incredibly important, incredibly difficult question. How can we approach this is something that this panel is going to delve into. We have a fantastic cast of characters here, and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about your moderator, and she'll be introducing your speakers. Your moderator is Ruth McLean. She's the West Africa Bureau Chief for the New York Times and joined the New York Times recently after 3.5 years covering West Africa for The Guardian. Some of you may have read her work. She is the author of the landmark Guardian articles about the chocolate industry's devastation of rainforests and deforestation for cocoa. But she's also covered some of the other biggest stories in the sub-region. She covered up the government cover-up of a rape crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo. She covered as well the tensions between herders and farmers in the highlands of Nigeria, in a piece that got tremendous echoes all over the continent. And previously, Ruth was based in Johannesburg for the Times of London, but actually Ruth grew up in Southern and East Africa. And she's a globetrotter. Not only has she been based in Johannesburg and Dakar, she's also been based in Mexico City. So she brings a really global perspective and a deep understanding of some of the toughest problems that bedevil the cocoa industry. Ruth, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll hand it over to you to kickstart the panel.
Ruth, your volume isn't working. Nope, still not. Oh, there, it's coming in, but very soft. Perhaps try taking off your headset. Yes, I can.
How's that?
That's so much better, Ruth. That's perfect now. Thank you.
I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm actually on the road at the moment and the connection isn't the best. So please accept my apologies for that. But thank you so much, Etel, for that extremely over-flattering introduction. And hello, everybody. It's great to be here. As Etel mentioned, our panel is on pests, cocoa, agroforestry and disease, and pest control. And as we know, many of the diseases and pests that plague cocoa production respond to temperature and humidity around the cocoa trees, which can be managed with agroforestry practices. Also, agroforestry systems can support bird, bat, and insect predators of cocoa pests. So today we're going to explore how cocoa agroforestry management mitigates cocoa diseases and pests. And we've got a really all-star panel today. We have Christian Andres, who is at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, the Department of Environmental System Science, who focuses on sustainability of tropical crop production systems. He works on biophysical and socioeconomic feasibility of agroforestry systems with cocoa and oil palm in West Africa. He also studied the comparative agronomic, economic, and ecological performance of organic versus conventional production systems in cocoa at the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture. And he has also studied cocoa swollen shoot virus disease. We also have, although he may be joining us with a video recording, I'm not sure, Pomasi Ismail, who has been a member of the Cocoa Aprabopa Association since 2007, that's in Ghana, and he's been growing cocoa on his own land for 18 years. As a board member, he represents the interests of 8,000 small farmers who are members of the cooperative in Ashanti in Ghana. We have Krisha Safarian, founder and managing director of Puratos Complas Indochina, who's been in the B2B chocolate business for 35 years, being one of the founders of OCG Cacao Group, which was acquired by Cargill. And since 2008, Krisha has been involved in introducing cocoa plantations in Vietnam with a number of sustainable cocoa sourcing programs. He set up the Cacao Trace Program and the Sustainable Cacao Institute, which is a non-profit think tank aiming at changing the paradigm in the cocoa supply chain. And finally, we have Luke Powell, who's the director and co-founder of Biodiversity Initiative. That's an NGO and research collaboration dedicated to exploration, ecology, and education in tropical rainforests. He's a conservation ecologist. He's the Marie Curie Fellow at the University of Glasgow, and he's a collaborating researcher at CBO in Portugal. He's worked in tropical rainforests since 2005 and is currently studying ecosystem services provided by nature in agroforestry systems in Africa. And one of the things he's previously studied is the effect of rainforest disturbance on birds of the Amazon. So I think we've got about 5 minutes each, going from one of our panelists to the next. So perhaps we could start with you, Christian.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Perfectly. We hear you.
Okay. And can you also see my screen?
Yes, slides just fine. Thank you.
Perfectly. Thank you very much, Ruth, for the introduction, and also to the organizers of this wonderful conference to bringing everyone together. And I greet you warmly from Ghana, where I'm based, and actually speaking from an organic agroforestry farm where I'm currently sitting. Very happy to say that. Okay, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit about agroforestry's role in natural regeneration of pest and disease. And basically, I want to touch on two questions today. First of all, what's the problem with the pesticides? And then secondly, can agroforestry replace, at least partly, the pesticides? So what's the problem with pesticides? Well, a lot of problems. First of all, we have heard this previously in the conference. There's alarming rate of decreasing global insect populations. They call this the insect apocalypse. So we have really lost a tremendous amount of species and also absolute numbers of insects. And this obviously, as they are at the basis of the food chain, can have effects and spillover effects on the organisms that are placed higher up in the food chain, which obviously includes us. Secondly, the health hazard from storing and using pesticides incorrectly. Recently, 23 children in India died from mistaking pesticide for cooking oil, which was actually stored in a cooking oil bottle close to the kitchen. And I mean, that's an extreme example, of course, but there is a hidden menace of pesticide poisoning among farmers, especially where I'm based in Ghana here. You have a lot of farmers who are unaware of the, kind of hidden effects that accumulate over time and only show later of using the pesticides without the proper protective clothing. But even if they know, even if the knowledge is there, they prefer not to actually wear them because it's just very uncomfortable in a hot climate to wear it like that. And so they refuse to do it. And that's a big problem. And thirdly, pesticides are also a climate problem. They have a high carbon footprint, both in the production of the pesticides, there is high carbon emissions, and then the products themselves also are potent greenhouse gases, especially the fumigants, which are the majority of the pesticides used worldwide, contribute to nitrous oxide emissions, which are very potent, I think 300 times as potent greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. So that's just in a nutshell, the problem that we are facing with pesticides, some of the problems. And then of course, the question, can cocoa agroforestry replace pesticides? The answer to this question is, it depends. Of course, it's a very complex and ambiguous topic. There are a lot of factors contributing to the solution and to the problem. And so the solutions also have to be case by case specific. So let me first break it down into the different categories of the pathogen. So we have the fungal diseases that are one of the major problems in cocoa. And as we have heard already in the previous day from Martijn, I think it was yesterday, there can be positive, negative effects or also neutral effects. And here I would like to show the results we've published last year in the meta-analysis in Ecology Letters. Frosty pod rot, for instance, was not different between monocultures and agroforestry. Black pod was slightly higher in agroforestry, and then witch's broom was slightly lower. So it really depends on how the agroforestry systems are designed, spatially, what species are integrated, and how these species and spatial arrangement of the shade trees can disrupt some of the sporulation mechanisms of the fungal diseases. And secondly, viral diseases, most prominently swollen shoot, maybe less severe. This is a result I was able to show during my PhD, and my very good friend Richard Asare and my colleague Hervé Bissoloya also showed the actual data from this paper on the first day, so thanks a lot for that. And then lastly, insect pests, as we have heard already, may be regulated by birds, bats, and insects. And I think my colleague Luke Powell later on in the panel will elaborate a little bit more on this. However, one of the main points I want to make today is that the potential regulating effect of agroforestry depends a lot on the species selection, so how these systems are designed and how they are spatially arranged, as we have heard also previously. And then secondly, the management and maintenance of the system is very important. I study dynamic agroforestry systems here in Ghana at the moment in my postdoc, and we have seen from the previous presentation that the management of these systems, I think Antoine showed it before, is really crucial point to reap its potential benefits, which was also shown in this paper. Under good cultural management practices, there is no difference between agroforestry and monoculture in terms of pest and disease pressure, published last year by FIBO. So agroforestry is not equals agroforestry. There are so many different agroforestry systems in different places, managed by different farmers in different ways. So we really need case-specific designs and management regimes. They are very crucial to reap agroforestry's full potential of natural pest and disease regulation. On that note, I would like to end with a beautiful picture from a large-scale dynamic agroforest from Ivory Coast. Thank you very much for your attention and looking forward to some exciting questions on the panel. Medasi. Ruth, I think.
Sorry. Thank you so much for that. Christian, that was really great. Beautiful picture, as you say. I think if we have a recording from Pomasi, we'll go to that next. Do we?
We have Pomasi joining us from his farm.
Oh, great. We have Pomasi live. Perfect. So let's go to you next, Pomasi. Hi.
Hello, good afternoon to you all. Please, can you hear me?
Good afternoon. Yes, we can hear you loud and
Great.
clear. And we can see the beautiful
Yes.
forest behind you.
That's my farm, actually. Yes, for me, on this session, I am going to share experience on how cocoa agroforestry, we have used it in our organization and as a farmer myself. For me, I believe that the issue of pesticide, we have to look at the history behind the use of pesticide and where we are currently, where we have to move away from pesticides to replacing it with cocoa agroforestry. Now, some years back, about 20, 15 years ago, we realized that cocoa farmers had a lot of trees in their farms, shade trees. I could even say that most farmers even had in excess of the recommended ones, which is about 6 to 9, shade trees per acre. Some farmers had more than that. And at a point in time, we had problem of this fungus disease, which is black pod. And the education that we had at that time was that to eradicate this black pod disease, farmers must ensure that there is a lot of ventilation in the farm, remove the excess, shade trees in our farm. And unfortunately, in our bid to do so, we ended up cutting a lot of these shade trees in our farms. Now, after cutting down these trees, we realized that we were able to put the black pod disease under some control. And some few years after removing these shade trees, we realized that in a drought season, then most of these trees, with the slightest sunshine, these trees were dying off. Now we've come to the stage where we have realized that removing the shade trees to provide. Hello?
We can still hear you, Pomasi. Please keep going. Oh, actually, now we've lost you. I think you might be on mute.
Hello? Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Good. So what I'm saying is that after we removed a lot of these shade trees from the farms, the black pod disease was under a bit somehow of a control. And then some years later, we realized that the trees could not withstand the sun, shade. Most of these trees during the drought were dying off. So the question then comes, how do we mitigate the effects of this climate change? And we all know that some of these heavy drought has to do with the climate change. So the issue of cocoa agroforestry, became a topical concern to us as an association. We started planting. Most of our farmers, we provided them with shade trees. From 2009, we actually joined certification in 2009. Up to date, the small farmers that we have, we've planted over 250,000 shade trees with strict monitoring to ensure that these shade trees actually, survive the conditions that we find in our farms. Unfortunately, I must say that the nature of the suns that we are experiencing is unable to help some of these shade trees to grow the way we are all expecting. Now, after we have done away with this pesticide, which to some extent was also a bit costly, farmer would have to, spend much of his income already. He's not, having a lot of, income from the cocoa. But the small money that you have with black pod disease and swelling shoots and myriad and all, you need to also get impulse to also, support or control these diseases. But if cocoa agroforestry is a way to go, then why don't we just welcome it and then ensure that farmers would actually plant these trees? But the major problem we have at the moment, which for me, I think that some of these platforms can help us to address them, is why are we not having more shade trees in our farms? I've already indicated that we were told that removing these shade trees would in a way help, control the black pod. But another serious challenge has to do with the fact that some of the farmers also sell these shade trees in their farms to these illegal, chainsaw operators. And it will baffle your mind to know the amount of money that they are paid for, cutting down these trees for timber. And the farmer, one doesn't know the benefit of these shade trees on the cocoa that he has planted. One. Two, he's cutting down these trees to also make some little income. But if he's already having some kind of a guaranteed income from his production, I am not sure that he will sell the cocoa, having known the benefits of these shade trees on the cocoa. He will sell these trees for these loggers to cut them down. It therefore tells us that the issue of the living income is also an area that we need to address seriously. The living income that would ensure that some of these, bad agricultural practices that farmers are doing, they will be able to stop it. But if he's suffering and he's not making a lot of money from the farm that he's doing, and somebody can just buy the tree, why will he not sell this tree to farmers? To these illegal, loggers? But where we've gotten to, those small farmer-based organizations like mine, we have also championed through certification, schemes. We have been able to encourage our farmers to plant these trees. And I believe that going forward, we must look at how do we incentivize farmers or farmer-based organizations that have actually welcomed this cocoa agroforestry, and to the extent that we give them that necessary support. I've already indicated that some of these shade trees are unable to withstand the heat. It therefore tells us that irrigation is also a way to go. We need to provide some kind of, technology in our farms. We need to irrigate our farms. They are capital intensive. The smallholder farmer himself cannot. There is that need for the industry to look at how do we support farmers, because just saying that cocoa agroforestry is the way to go does not conclude the whole issue. You plant the tree and you must ensure that the survival rate of these trees are very high. I want to conclude my speech by saying that at the end of cocoa agroforestry, what next? If we grow cocoa to the extent that the cocoa farm now looks like a forest, we have all the number of trees, we have the birds, we have the insects. Of course, I believe that this cocoa agroforestry program would bring back some of the pollinators, will bring back some of the insects. It will diversify the farmers' income. But at the end of the day, will that ensure the living income that we want for our farmers? As a farmer, will I get the living income if I'm able to plant these trees? Is the industry prepared enough to pay the price that would ensure my living income? if we are not able to conclude on these discussions, then every year, every decade, every 5 years, we'll come back and look at some new interventions. We've gone through a number of interventions, but at the end of the day, all researchers, they are all indicating, I mean, Antonio and his team showed clearly that the farmer is not, even with the living income differential introduced, so the farmer is far, closer to how do you call it, attaining the living income. And we all know that price, for me, which is the engine of sustainability, is something that we must all, assure ourselves that at the end of the day, cocoa agroforestry, will it lead to industry paying more for the farmer? If that narrative is out, then I'm sorry to say that all these discussions will always have them, and then they wouldn't actually yield the benefits that we all desire. The industry must be supportive enough. We need to make sure the farmer is attaining a living income from the little work that we are doing, and then from cocoa that we are doing. That is the surest way to go. Solving living income problem would help us solve a lot of sustainability, challenges that we are dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Kwamasi. That was really interesting, and I think that our next speaker might have things to say about that as well. Grisha, I know that you are also concerned about farmers' incomes. Perhaps I could hand over to you now for your 5-minute presentation.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ruth. So first of all, I'm not an expert in pest and disease. I'm more of an expert in creating value in the cocoa supply chain. That is what I've been doing for a few years, for a long time actually. And why do I say that? Because in the last 2 months we have landed twice on planet Mars, right? Which is a fantastic achievement for the human being. But I have been hearing claims, goodwill, intention. I have been seeing thousands of organizations, individuals, companies, associations in the last 20 years saying that they were going to solve the problems of the cocoa supply chain. And every year it gets worse, actually. So I have been trying to understand, and I will relate to the pest and disease issue. I have been trying to understand, as a private operator in the cocoa supply chain, from cocoa bean to chocolate, I've been trying to understand what was wrong. And I believe, because I always try to make things simple, I believe that the simple way to describe the issue is that we are all trying to solve the problem by sharing value, giving grants, giving subsidies, financing program, but actually we are not creating value in the cocoa supply chain. And this is a huge issue, which I think can be translated into very simple ideas. I always say that there is in this cocoa supply chain a lack of respect for the 3F, the farmers, the fruit, and the forest. And if we were to introduce respect for those 3F, we would switch the paradigm of productivity first to the detriment of quality. And I'm talking quality for the fruit, I'm talking quality for the sustainability in the environment, and I'm talking, of course, living income for the farmers. If we would switch to quality first, and value creation, we would generate a lot of resources that could be shared between the farmers who would get a better living income and the environment who would benefit from, for example, organic certification, which implies a decreased use of pesticides, or closed loop farming models, for example, which we are experimenting in Vietnam for 1 year now, and which are giving a very good result in terms of farmers' income, productivity, and reduction of pesticide. So I have a slide here, my single slide. So how does pest and disease relies to that? Well, I believe that pest and disease in a cocoa supply chain is the symbol of intense productivity agriculture model, not paying attention to the complexity of the agroforestry. And the problem of the cocoa supply chain, it's commodity based, right? So increasing the productivity is actually decreasing the price of the beans. Hence, if you increase productivity, you decrease living income of the farmers. Because yeah, they might produce a bit more per hectare, but usually the drop in price will be more important. And so this is an entire system. That's when I want to change the paradigm, because this is an entire system that is based on creating the value on the side of the industry, okay, the chocolate maker and the commodity traders and so on, and neglecting the necessary value creation on the side of the forest and of the farmers. So in this closed loop farming model that we are experimenting in Vietnam, as you can see, we start with quality cocoa. So quality cocoa is the first step of value creation, because we are going to sell this cocoa at a higher price. The farmers is going to get a better price, and the resource for the environment will be better. And from there, we go through a virtuous circle of looping between the farm waste, fermented animal feed, the manure that we can turn into compost or black soldier fly larvae. In turn, we get nutrients which are rich in fertilizer, and we come back to the quality cocoa. These kinds of models that we are testing and prototyping here in Vietnam, in an overall model of value creation, making a more expensive cocoa, paying the farmers at a much higher price. The cocoa farmers in Vietnam, I believe, get the best paid cocoa in the world. So this model is decreasing the pest and disease, it's decreasing the CO2 emission, and the value of this model is benefiting the farmers and the environment first. So that would be, I suppose, my conclusion of the 5 minutes. I cannot say much in 5 minutes, but if I want to summarize, we need to create more value in this cocoa supply chain, and a lot of issues will be solved because they will be financed.
Thank you very much for that, Krisha. I think we can all agree that cocoa farmers need to be paid more. Could we please go to Luke Powell now? But may I also just, just before we go to him, ask everybody, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat box, in the Q&A box, sorry, so that we can put them to our panel. That will be great and help us facilitate discussions. But now over to Luke.
And I may hop in just that I think our translator has been stepping up again for someone who is missing in action. So Justin, as our translator, I'm happy to break and I'll translate the end of this panel. You're fine. Okay. All right. You're heroic. Thank you, Justin.
Well, thank you very much, Ruth. Thank you, Etel, for this lovely conference and the opportunity to speak about my research. I'm going to talk to you about the work I've been doing for the last 4 years in Cameroon to understand the birds and the bats that consume cocoa pests. Next slide, please. So I think it's important to keep in perspective that the farmers are completely immersed in their environment. They're immersed in the food web. This is a Samba Christian in Ibec in Cameroon. So nature-based, that is non-pesticide pest control, is more sustainable. It benefits the farmer's health, benefits their wallets, and it benefits the ecosystem and food web as a whole. Next slide, please. And as the farmers will tell you, there are many pests and diseases that cause massive losses for them. This is about $500 million annually, the GDP of a small country. And true bugs, that is hemipterans, are among the most insidious. You can see mealybugs, this example on the left, and the brown capsid, or otherwise known as brown mirid, on the right, which is probably the worst one in Cameroon. So we're focused on those for this study. And birds and bats are probably consuming these pests, but there's no hard evidence of this. This is a lovely wattle eye on the left and a Hipposideris bat on the right side. Next slide, please. So we use a technique which is brand new, the last 5 years or so, called DNA barcoding. And stay with me here. We collect thousands of feces samples from birds and bats in the field in Cameroon, extract the DNA from them. We sequence that DNA, and then we use that to determine which insect DNA is in the feces of the birds and bats. So we can tell which pest that they ate, basically. That sentence took me about 10 seconds, but the process takes years. So to quantify the effects of this consumption by birds and bats of pests, we sought to replicate the experiment that my colleague Christian mentioned. That was Bea Massa's 2013 ecology letter study. That was done in Indonesia, but this has never been done in Africa, even though Africa is about 70% of the cocoa in the world. So the idea is that we built these exclosure experiments, which you can see on the left. So you put this loose netting where insects can pass freely, but birds and not bats cannot access the cocoa trees. Those are called exclosures. Then on the right, we compare those to control trees where birds and bats can come as they please and eat pests. Next slide, please. So we had a local entomologist, Alan Wanji, basically count as many arthropods insects as you can on all of these trees. Next slide, please. And this is just a small proportion of the results, and just concentrate on the circled taxa here. Hemipterans, that's true bugs of all kinds. There was about a 50% reduction in the number of true bugs when you cover up the trees. And mealybugs had about a 5-fold reduction. So when you don't have birds and bats, you have 5 times more mealybugs. So it's a huge, huge change. And birds and bats are providing this incredible service. We didn't have a huge change in brown capsids, probably because most of our suns were rather shady, as is the case in much of Cameroon. Next slide, please. And overall, this results in a big change in productivity. So there's about a 27% drop in the number of pods that are produced when you cover the trees up and birds and bats can't access them. And that's remarkably similar to Bea Massa's estimate of 31%. That resulted in Massa's study in a $600 per hectare per year in savings. So we're calculating these numbers in our system, and we imagine that it'll be pretty close. Next slide, please. So what we seek to do next here is to manage the farms to get these beneficial insectivores into the system. So starting from the left, you can basically add shade trees, which these insectivores quite like, and the right species of shade trees in amongst the cocoa and around it. You can add bat boxes so that bats nest and roost in these habitats. That'll increase the insectivorous bird and bat numbers and then decrease the pest numbers. So we're working on a dynamic system for how to make this work. And next slide, thank you. So this whole system is a rather huge and complicated food web. And the farmers are totally embedded in this food web. Next slide. And Asamba here and his family are a huge part of that. They're using every part of this food web. So you can see Asamba's son down in the front center is actually eating the fruit, which they do frequently, and so do I. I mean, it's delicious if you've never tried it. Cocoa fruit's incredible. But when pesticides are sprayed, that disrupts the food web in all portions. It can disrupt the insects themselves, which disrupts the insectivores and can disrupt pest services. It's damaging to the farmers, as Christian and others have mentioned. And it also hurts the main protein source for many of these farmers, which are antelope, porcupine, and chickens. I mean, chickens eat tons of insects, and that's the primary food source for many farmers. So really insidious effects. Next slide. And so pesticides can cause a total collapse of the food web, as we're often seeing worldwide in these systems in much of the developed world and elsewhere, where they've sprayed huge amounts of pesticide and disrupted this food web. This can damage the health of the farmers and that of their families and the long-term sustainability of the food web. So To wrap things up, let's use the best available science that we have to find win-win nature-based solutions in this system. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Luke. And thank you all. We just, we have one more person actually. We have an extra commentator, surprise guest on this panel, who I'd just like to ask if she has anything she'd like to contribute as well. She is Letitia Yankee. She's with the Women in Cocoa, an association of women cocoa farmers in Dunkwa on Ofin in the central region of Ghana. And she was judged the most enterprising female cocoa farmer in Ghana in 2019. So Letitia, if you're on the call, what would you like to add to our discussion?
I think she's having some internet connectivity issues. Leticia, if you are on, please turn on your camera and unmute.
Yes, thank you very much for letting. I was struggling to get inside, and I'm happy I'm here. In fact, with agroforestry in cocoa, me as a farmer, I've seen that agroforestry provides shade for the cocoa tree as well as the other perennial fruits on the cocoa farm. And we've also seen that in controlling pests, when there's trees in the cocoa farm, it saves the cocoa from pests. The pests, sorry, because I was struggling to get on board, I've actually lost control. So let me come again. Agroforestry in cocoa farming saves pests from destroying the cocoa pods. This is because the agroforestry, the trees on the cocoa farm, serve as canopy and shade for the cocoa. So the scorching sun cannot affect the cocoa so much. And most of the pests that destroy the cocoa are rested on the trees, which are normally taller than the cocoa. When you plant a lot of trees in the cocoa, it also gather moisture in the farm, and this avoid excessive heat from affecting the cocoa trees, and this in effect increase yield on the cocoa farm. Moreover, the pests in the cocoa, there are other pests which serve as predator for the bats that destroy the cocoa, and this reduce the number of pests the number of pests that affect the cocoa, thereby reducing the diseases that affect the cocoa. With the swelling shoot, if you plant other trees among the cocoa tree, it's help in reducing the swelling shoot diseases among the cocoa trees. And so I think that agroforestry should go alongside the planting of cocoa tree, that's the cocoa farming. And doing so, we the farmers need more funds to do that. And so I will plead with the EU communities to make sure that the LID is put in place so that we the farmers can undertake agroforestry among our cocoa farming to save the lives of the cocoa and increase our yield. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Letitia. We are getting a few questions coming in. Oh, Letitia, we can suddenly see you. That's great.
Yes, sorry, I have to run all the way to a place so I can get better network, and because of traffic, I was running on my feet. So sorry, sorry, I have to mess up. Yeah.
No worries at all. So we've got a couple of questions. If I could maybe, we've got a few that are directly addressed to certain people. So Luke, perhaps we could go to you for these couple of questions that we've got. One is from Kathy Watson. What are the right species of trees for the birds and bats? And then also one from Elizabeth Johnson. How to control birds that consume cocoa? Would you be able to address those?
Sure. So
Yes.
I'll start with the easy question first. And that would be birds that consume cocoa are none that I'm aware of. I've heard some vague rumors that African gray parrots can consume cocoa. They're among the very small number of birds with a beak that's strong enough to bite that kind of pod. But they are virtually extinct in Ivory Coast and Ghana and are very, very rare around farms in cocoa throughout Africa because they're persecuted. So that is not a problem. Birds and bats generally do not consume cocoa. It's not an issue of anything remotely close to any arthropod species that's a pest. And in terms of the right species of trees for the birds and bats, that's absolutely the next step in our research. There are a couple ficus species that are particularly appealing because they have many benefits for farmers. They provide an absurd amount of fruit, and the fruit also brings lots of flies and whatnot that are probably pollinators and are probably also what alternative foods for the birds and bats. So that's absolutely the next step in our work. We've identified every single tree species in our farms and now are matching it up with the species that the birds and bats that we know are now pest consumers. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you so much. I think we have quite a few questions for you, Christian, but it seems like you're going through and responding to them all directly. So I'm just seeing if there are any that haven't been answered. But one thing that I wondered, and Christian, you mentioned this earlier in your presentation, but I know other people are also thinking about it, is how does all this intersect with carbon and thus with climate change? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Maybe, yes. I can give the beginning of an answer. So from the industry point of view, what we are doing is, of course, promoting organic chocolate, which already gives some guarantee of a lower usage of pesticide. And we are also, on our side, we are going to launch by the end of this year the first carbon neutral chocolate, at least made in Vietnam, in our operations, which is much more difficult than we anticipated, because it implies a lot of calculation, a lot of compensation to work out. We have to install solar panels. We have to buy carbon certificates from different sources. So the combination of an organic and a carbon neutral certification for a product like chocolate is actually a solution, because it sells to a higher price, so it creates more value. And to reach this certification, you have to go through a series of constraints that is making the environment and the product more sustainable.
Thank you, Krisha. Anybody else? Not really? Okay. Just looking in the question box. I mean, one of the things that has come up quite a bit in this discussion is, you know, farmers' incomes. And we had that very, passionate presentation from Pomasi. And I guess I just wonder, how do these two things resolve? How do they sit with each other? Farmers, need to use pesticides, and then the impact that they are having, how does this square economically?
Maybe I can go on that one. It's a very complex topic, obviously, and what Pomasi said is very, very true. That if there are no incentives, then why should farmers do what in the end leads to their lower income? So first of all, I think if we want to transition from, I'm speaking mostly West African case, largely intensive monoculture-like systems where sometimes a lot of input is used. If you want to transition back to traditional and agroforestry farms, then that's a gradual process, and this needs to be facilitated by different interventions and also innovations. It shouldn't be looked at only in isolation, the pest and disease topic. I think it's a whole complex of things you need to look at, and pest and disease in the end is always a symptom of a system that is not working. So it's not in balance, right? But how can you get it back to balance? You need some time, obviously. You need a healthy system. So I always like this saying, prevention is better than cure. So you would have to find a way to manage your system in such a way that you don't have to solve problems, but actually prevent the problems in the first place. And for that, you need a healthy soil. So the healthy soil is very crucial to have a healthy plant that can defend itself from pests, and a healthy environment, as we have heard. So the right environment that harbors the right organisms, so that this natural self-regulation could really be, captured and used. And for that, it goes very quickly then also into landscape questions, and you need policy support and a whole lot of things. So one thing which we also have heard previously, the certification, Rainforest Alliance and all the certification people, I think they have a great stake and a great responsibility to push these systems. Maybe you can think about, sound agroforestry, true intentional agroforestry label, or whatever, to really increase and incentivize farmers to do agroforestry. And then they need to be supported with innovations such as varieties, adapted varieties in the West African context, where everything has been pushed to full sun monoculture, high input, short-term cocoa production with high yields. You need adapted varieties that are able to produce high yields for a long period of time under these more shaded systems. And you also need when it comes to you are having a problem, because you cannot manage all of these at once. If something is still out of balance, you need a good pest control product, which some of them are on the market, the ones which are not so harmful to human beings and who are not so disruptive to the whole cocoa ecosystem with the pollinators and all this. For example, neem oil based products and so on. They are there, natural and organic pesticides, but there's a huge potential that is out there when you look at natural and biodynamic farming systems applied around the globe, India and other places, where there's an innovation potential, and there need to be investments into developing these products and bringing them to the market for the farmers, because the demand from the farmers, I'm speaking as a farmer now in Ghana, also an agroforestry farmer in Ghana here, it is there, but it is difficult to get these products that actually help you to produce in this more sustainable and nature-friendly ways. So we need the right incentives, we need the right products, we need help to transition towards a better future for cocoa agroforestry.
Thank you so much for that, Christian. We have a couple of questions which I think are, one is quite specific and another perhaps has been touched on a bit already, but just in case anybody has any thoughts on either of them. One is there any empirical evidence for the food security and livelihood benefits of cocoa agroforestry relative to other ways producers could use their land and labor resources? And the other is, yes, true, more income for the farmer, but would it not impact negative the fermentation process? I think this is in response to you, Krisha. And does it really generate more income for the farmer versus buying sustainable fertilizer?
And I must jump in to say we only have like 1 minute more, 2 minutes more for this session. So if you guys can give elevator pitch answers to Ruth and keep it under 20 seconds for your answers.
Letitia.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understood the question on fermentation, but fermentation in the cocoa supply chain is one way to create value, actually.
Thank you, Krisha. Let's go to Letitia.
Yeah, thank you. Cocoa agroforestry does not impact negatively on fermentation. Rather, I think it's helpful from this. Sometimes when you ferment the cocoa under a shade, it's really helps. It really helps. Sorry, I have to go out because.
Pomasi, perhaps we could go to you for a last thought while we're waiting for Letitia to get somewhere a bit more quiet.
The trees actually serve as an economic source for the farmers. And when we plant the trees, it's rather affects the cocoa positively because it gives the cocoa shade. And when we are fermenting the cocoa, when we are fermenting, we use some of the plantain leaves to ferment the cocoa, and it gives the nice flavor. So I think that agroforestry rather helps fermentation more than do harm to fermentation.
Thank you so much, Letitia. That's great. Pomasi, any last final very short thought?
Yes, my last thought is this. Yes, when we look at the climate, it has not been conducive for cocoa growing in recent times. And cocoa agroforestry is the way to go. We all, have to admit it. We need to provide some kind of shade for our cocoa trees. But for me, I want the discussion to go beyond just cocoa agroforestry. After making the farms look like forest, what next? Are we going to produce more cocoa? And demand and supply will be the explanation to why prices are not going up. And I believe that we should go beyond cocoa agroforestry and some other sustainability challenges that we seem to be, discussing all the time. The key element here is how do we get the best of the industry's profit? That is an area that I want us to also champion and discuss passionately. But most of these sustainability challenges.
Thank you so much. You're breaking up, but I think. Thank you so much. Yes, I think very good question. What's next? But next, right now, is back to Etel. Thank you so much for, thank you so much, this wonderful panel, all the members on it. It's been a really interesting discussion and I'm so privileged to be here. Thank you.
It was wonderful to have all of you on this panel, which really touched on things that are so vital for the future of the cocoa industry, and not just for farmers, I think for everybody. So that was a fantastic exploration. We had all these different perspectives of industry and farmers and science. And yeah, thank you, Ruth, also for doing a wonderful job moderating. And now I think we're going to go into one of our interactive sessions, which is a polling session. So you all who were here for day one may recall that we had a polling session on day one. And we're going to throw up some of the results from that poll. But also we're going to have a new polling session, and the person who's going to run our interactive polling session really perhaps needs no introduction for many of you. She's a star, Suzanne, now the Managing Director for Africa at CIAT, which is the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. And she has over 12 years of experience working with Biodiversity International, USAID, World Bank, DFID, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Walmart Foundation, the Mastercard Foundation, and many of you have seen her when she was the Côte d'Ivoire Country Director for the World Cocoa Foundation. So this is only the tip of the iceberg. She also has 6 years of experience in public partnership development and policy dialogue for trade in 8 of the 15 ECOWAS member states in West Africa. So Suzanne really brings an understanding of diplomacy, trade, industry, biodiversity, and scientific research. She's got it all. If one person can have it in a package, it's Suzanne. And Suzanne, we're going to help you with the polling that we're going to put up on the screen. It would just be wonderful for you to share your thoughts with us about how you see going on, and also what you think about the results from the polling, so you can riff and share your insights.
So can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you perfectly, loud and clear, and your video is also perfect. Thank you.
Good. I've been trying to get the best connection I could for the day. Thank you, Ethel, for this great introduction. We are going to start the polling. I knew that we are running late. There's some background noise behind. I don't know where it's coming from, but
if everybody can mute themselves and we just unmute Suzanne only, that would be perfect.
Great. So the first question I will ask you is, can you tell me where you are joining us from? Africa, Asia, Europe, Oceania, Americas, the moon? Please select one of the options and let us know where you're coming from.
And while you guys are doing the poll, I'm going to just change translators. So you may hear some talking.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I think we've got the translator switch now achieved.
So that's great. So it was good to see during the last 3 days how we've been able to kill some of the myth around cocoa agroforestry. And I think it was a good opportunity for everybody to look at, you know, yes, it takes time. Yes, it takes investments. But I think the most important thing was to hear from the farmers on the last day, even though I thought we should have heard from them more. So if we look at the entre nous, 34% of you are coming from the Americas. That's the biggest proportion, followed by Europe. Then Africa, 29%. That's where most of the cocoa is produced. So that's good. But also colleagues from Asia. Unfortunately, nobody came from Oceania, but maybe next time. You know, they do some very good cocoa there, also specialty cocoa. So we'll do better in making sure that we include them also in the next conversations. Can we go to the next question, please?
And we're so grateful to everyone from Asia who was up late at night their time. And of course, it was also Ramadan in Indonesia. And so, yeah, thank you to everyone who was heroically joining us despite the time difference. And
so the following poll is, where are you in the cocoa value chain? What segment are you located? Are you a cocoa processor, a cocoa trader, a producer, a cooperative or association, farmer group? Are you a retailer? Are you a member of the civil society, a financial institution, member of government, of course, my colleagues from science and academia, or aficionados of cocoa?
Responses are coming in, Suzanne, but I don't know if you can see them. They're just coming, they're trickling in. Okay, I will share them in 1 second. We have a number of different questions. There are 4 questions. And so people are going to be responding to all 4 of those, although I think, Suzanne, you can only see the first. As soon as they're done, we'll go
I
ahead.
can only see the second.
Oh, you can see the second. Okay.
But if they come all in one, you know, I'm very good at making sure that I'm busy in that
Zoom
time.
is not
So let's go back into the meat.
Suzanne is a multitasker extraordinaire.
So one of the big myths that I think we've been able to kill during those last 3 days is that cocoa agroforestry is new and that we have no data, that there is no experiment, that there is no experience to be shared. And we've seen from the diversity of the cocoa world that there is experience, that there is ancestral, you know, production system that have been using agroforestry system, and also to show some of the responsibilities that we all have within the system and the value chain in having chosen one or other production system over the years. The one that I really love was the idea to think, I think it was Antoine who said that when you talked to the private sector during one of his surveys for the Cocoa Barometer, he asked for definitions of agroforestry, and he got everything from one tree in the middle of a cocoa farm to very intricate and elaborated cocoa production systems, and that was very funny. So if we look at where we are sitting in terms of the value chain, we will see that there is a lot of my peers, again, on this call. The majority are coming from science and academia, but science and academia doesn't mean that it's only people writing, it is people experimenting, searching, proving, testing, improving sometimes. Of course, civil society, they are the voice, they are the one who disseminate everything that we have been searching, digging, experimenting. Very happy to see and the cooperatives and producers in this, and then cocoa producers and cocoa traders, and of course, very important, government officials, even though I would have liked them to be a lot more present on these 3 days and this last day, because this is now that we are going to be able to give the keynote and really look at what are the next steps. What is it that we should do to use Jack Stein idea to continue the optimism, and that will lead us to have cocoa as the best pupil in the class, to be the best practice and the best example of how you can establish. And cocoa is, I always said, it's sexy. It's romantic, it's emotional. And if cocoa can actually be a champion of agroforestry and be the one that will catalyst a little bit of public attention around agroforestry, that would have been great. So can we have the next question?
Suzanne, to see the results to your email.
Yes, the next result.
Because, yeah, because for some reason they're not letting you see them, even though they're showing up on some of the screens.
Oh, well, I can just run through them for you, Suzanne.
Okay.
So,
brilliant.
Yeah, you've already gotten number 1. And for number 2, there were these questions. What are you hoping to take away from the conference? And there was a very strong preponderance of votes for clear understanding of roadmap successful agroforestry. And then there were right after that, neck and neck, better visibility of what's happening already in cocoa agroforestry was right behind that. And just a little bit beyond that was technical know-how and understanding financial benefits and understanding the social benefits and the biodiversity benefits. They were all like toward the end.
So here again, thank you very much, Etel, for giving the result, because now nothing shows at all. So I would have to go through what you are telling me. These are the beauty of life. But I think that it is important. It is important to see that there was interest in understanding better, but I think that you have presented a very good tool in the Cocoa Agroforestry Library, and people can see different examples and experience and ways backed up by science. It is a great collection of technical itineraries, experience, reviews, understanding, definitions, because there isn't the one definition, there are definitions. of what can be agroforestry for you in your model, in your system, from establishing to rehabilitation and everything in between. So I think it is very important that there is, and it is not very normal that people view and, oh, wow. Now I've got something that says only 0%.
I just launched the third poll. We had a whole bunch of polls for you, Suzanne.
Yeah, I know.
We did have some other results, Andrea, that I wanted to share with Suzanne as well. Suzanne, before we go into the next poll, there was something really interesting that popped up in the third question. The majority overwhelmingly, they know about cocoa. People said they know a lot, and 1% said they know nothing. So it was really interesting. That was like a strong showing, a strong preponderance.
But I think it also reflects the kind of type of participants we have also to this 3 days conference. There is a little bit what we call in French the entre nous. There is a lot of people that have been like you, like me, like every single one. You know, it was very good to see friends that we haven't seen in a couple of years because of COVID and all those things, you know, to see their face while they were presenting. But there is a real conscience among this group of what agroforestry is and what are the challenges and how we can do it and cannot do it. There is different current and viewpoints. That's also true. But you know, but there is great knowledge. And you know, we've also seen that there were about 6% of cocoa enthusiasts, the people that are not from the value chains, but that also joined. And it is also normal that they will have less knowledge of what we are talking about and what the subject matter is, but still want to know and curious to know more about it. So I think that the results were completely coherent and in line with the type of crowd and audience we have for those 3 days.
What you said is so deep and important, Suzanne, because maybe it's also a testament to the fact that we're a little bit pre-converted here, that we're bringing all the people who are already in the cocoa space towards sustainability, but that we didn't bring enough people who know nothing about agroforestry cocoa. Maybe it would have been a more high impact conference if we'd had 99% saying, I don't know anything about cocoa agroforestry. So perhaps next time we'll try to hit less of the entre nous and more of the new converts to the cocoa.
Exactly. Can you share with me some other results as I cannot see them at all?
I can't see the results, but Andrea, for some
lovely. So yes, the question, what cocoa agroforestry subjects that we covered, you were the most interested in, of course, cocoa agrobiodiversity is the one that came first. Carbon sequestration came second, followed by climate resiliency as a tie with cocoa agroforestry. I'm not surprised, but also it shows also what has been the trend. It's really reflecting the trends. You know, cocoa agroforestry has been there forever. But what has kind of put cocoa agroforestry back on the discussion board was, of course, deforestation and rampant deforestation in West Central Africa and also in the Amazons. But it was also the idea that we needed more carbon sequestration and that companies were looking to offset and the private sector took an interest. And from that, we saw that, but there's also things that come very strongly from the farmer's perspective. When we see 52% or 54% on agroforestry and income diversification and food security, that's where you see also that those have those two viewpoints coming together. The conservation elements of cocoa agroforestry, but also the income diversification. I've heard my brother from Ghana just before saying that all that is brilliant, but I need a living income and making sure that quality is there, that company is ready to pay so that I can guarantee better cocoa at better price and make those extra investments that are being asked of me. I think that another one, and I think that this kills a little bit another myth of cocoa agroforestry, which is that farmers don't care. They do not care. They have no vested interest in agroforestry or setting up agroforestry system. And that is not true, because everything that we have presented and talked about and reviewed and dissected and kind of debated. Our experience are, all that is happening on farmers' land. Every single one of those papers are actually coming from the plot of somebody somewhere. Everything that we have pictures and photographs is coming from farmers' farm. We had the representative of Ghana cocoa farmers that just said agroforestry is not harmful to cocoa, and we are all interested in doing it. But we also have humanistic issues that we need to cover, and also to be able to free the investment that will enable us to do it. So how long do I have, Etel? Because I know we're running late, so now
we're running a little bit late, but it's so fascinating to hear you talk about all these things, Suzanne. I think we can go for another 5 minutes. And I just had a thought when I was listening to you. I wonder if we had a higher farmer participation, which was one of the lower participant numbers and percentages, I wonder how much that would have changed what we're most interested in. I have a feeling it would have really moved the results more into pest control and diversification. So maybe this is something for us to keep in mind next time also.
But I was happy to hear that some private sector were champions of this. I was very happy to hear that some other value chain actors actually were champion of better cocoa, greater price, greater investments. When we listen to the section about financing of agroforestry systems, and I remember also Méritant saying from the EU saying that the extra money has come. There is some extra money coming, and if we sustain the level of price and make sure that the living income that was paid last year will become something sustainable and steady, and the mechanism is well set up, then there will be that extra investment that will actually entice farmers to actually invest more. Because as we've seen in those polls, and as Denis and Eduardo said in the first panel today, there is a lot of benefits beyond the ecosystemic benefits to actually cocoa agroforestry that are very linked to humanity needs like nutrition, saving, non-timber fruit products, and things like that. The other thing is, I think that a lot of people forget that when we're saying we are going to intercrop cocoa with fruits, cocoa is a fruit tree. So it is to say to include more tree diversity and fruits and food diversity in the cocoa farm. So if I can, I will be followed by some very distinguished panelists. So very sorry, Etel, if I'm straying a little bit from the poll here, and that I'm speaking directly to Pablo and Michelle on this one. Pablo, Michelle, I'm very honored to be preceding you before the closing of this event. The poll has shown, very important issues on the interest, on where people are coming from, what part of the sector they're coming from, what are the most important issues according to us to address cocoa agroforestry and also promote it. But let's not forget one thing. Cocoa agroforestry doesn't stop deforestation. And I think that this is something somebody said in the chat yesterday, and I noted it, and I think this needed to be repeated. And you, Pablo and Michelle, are actually in positions of influencing, advising, and working with governments that are setting the policies and creating the enabling environments that will enable and deforestation and the setup of new policies that will encourage better rehabilitation, encouraging agroforestry system, making sure that it is a win-win situation for both farmers, industrials, and government alike, and to make it better for our planet. So please push the agenda. Sometimes be daring, make sure that you get the best information. Academia is here to support you. Make sure that the civil society is able to champion and vehiculate and circulate all the messaging. That's their role, let's not forget them. And make sure that in the new programs that are being generated, in those big initiatives that are coming, and the cocoa and forest initiative from around the world that we have in Latin America and in West and Central Africa are very important, but we need more. we need also for the enabling environment to be there, not only in papers, not only in commitments, but also in actions. And you guys are the best position to attract also and catalyze a little bit of those investments that will make it a reality. So I don't want to take more of your time. Ethel, I am humble. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Suzanne.
Those were great 3 days. Congratulations to you. Michel, bonjour. I can see you in the background.
Suzanne, your wisdom and your breadth of knowledge and your insights are always remind me of an organ player who's playing many different things at once. It was just lovely to have you kind of make sense of some of the polling and what it shows us about who came, what they understand, what they want more of, and to situate that in the broader context that you understand so well of what the countries need, what the industry needs, what farmers need, because you've really sat in all different kinds of fora and you've got this really broad understanding, even far, far, far beyond the conference. So it helps to situate the conference in that broader context. So I'm so grateful for your moderation. And now it gives me great pleasure to transition to our next session, which is going to be our closing session. This is moderated by Jérôme Tokpa. Jérôme is the Senior Manager for West Africa for the Earthworm Foundation, which is one of the co-sponsors of this conference. Many of you will know Earthworm by their previous name, which is the Forest Trust, TFT. Jérôme supports smallholder and large-scale agriculture in Côte d'Ivoire and beyond, all over West Africa. And he goes all the way from the bird's eye view to the field. He does data analysis, field visits, mentoring, all the way to big strategic vision, usually with a focus on cocoa. And within this framework of large-scale agriculture, Jérôme is one of these rare people who's able to best help agribusiness companies to set up the kind of responsible sourcing that we need in cocoa and other agri-commodities, including working on full traceability of supply chains, helping to develop agroforestry systems, a host of other sustainability concerns, and perhaps most interestingly, given that we just had these panels about farmers, about putting farmers at the heart of agroforestry, facilitating relationships between industry and local communities and farmers. So Jérôme is coming to us from West Africa. Jérôme is going to be introducing our closing speakers. Jérôme, we're so pleased to have you with us today. I wish I were with you in Côte d'Ivoire right now, and we could be doing this side by side with Pablo and Michel and Richard with us. But since that's not possible in these pandemic times, I hand it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ethel. I'm very happy because I think the three of the speakers are actually from, I mean, they're not from Ivory Coast, but they are, Richard Assare is from Ghana, Michel Arion is sitting here in Abidjan, and Pablo Pavesi, I guess, may not be very far also because Barry Calbo is here in Ivory Coast. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the last hour of the last day of our workshop. We have learned a lot during the 3 days. And I think the three prominent speakers who are going to close this workshop will give us a kind of, roadmap of the way forward, the future of the cocoa agroforestry. But before moving, presenting them, I just want to present very quickly Earthworm Foundation. Earthworm Foundation is a non-profit organization. It's a member-based organization founded in 1999. Next slide, please. We work on the ground. 80% of the employees are on the ground, working, developing solutions at the heart of social and environmental challenges that the world is actually facing, and the problem we have been talking about during the 3 days. Next slide. We are in 17 countries around the world, so we are on the 5 continents, as you can see in the slide. we have to go very quick because we don't have that much time. People are tired. We work on a range of products going from palm oil, cocoa, as you can see, rubber, etc., etc. Next slide. And our approach is actually to help our member company to define what we call a responsible commitment and sustainability journey, and then how can can they set up, can they implement this sustainability commitment? And after that, we have to convene in the different subsidiaries, the experts, let's say interdisciplinary experts, coming from going from entrepreneurs, producers, consumers, etc., to come with some solution. So in a participative way, come with solution that overcome some, let's say, sometimes mental and physical barriers actually. And if we have such solution, then we can share these successes, we can share the stories with more larger audience, so that we can ignite, chain reaction. Next slide. So next slide. Yeah, as you know, we have been speaking a lot about agroforestry, but I think one of the key things is, and Susanna has been speaking about that, is really the deforestation. And it is because the deforestation is really taking a trend that we are looking for solution or alternative. How can we better plant cocoa? Next slide. My country, as Ivory Coast, is one of the key, the biggest cocoa producer in the world, but at the same time, one of the key drivers of deforestation, actually. 38% of deforestation due to agriculture is linked to cocoa. So there is really a need to see how we can fix those challenges. Next slide. So, and who better than the three prominent I have the privilege to present here, can actually speak about the way forward. How can we, what are the perspectives we can grab so that we really embark in this sustainable journey. So I'm going to present each of the speakers. The first is Michel Arion. Michel Arion is the Executive Director of International Cocoa Organization, a lawyer by training. He previously was in EU civil servant for 30 years. He served in the Directorate General for International Cooperation and Development in the EU delegation in Mali, in Brussels, managing the EU's financial committees, as head of service at the European Committee Humanitarian Office in charge of programming humanitarian aid and institutional relation with the United Nations NGOs. He then served as ambassador at the European Union in Nigeria, Rwanda, Liberia, and Cote d'Ivoire. The second speaker is Richard Assari. I think most of the people in West Africa know Richard Assari. He joined the IITA, let's say International Institute of Tropical Agriculture in 2006 as the regional cocoa agroforester in the different sustainable tree crop program in Ghana. For people who do not know the International Institute of Agriculture, please bear in mind that it is a non-profit institution that generates agriculture innovation to meet Africa's most pressing challenges of hunger, malnutrition, poverty, and natural resource degradation. His in-depth knowledge on integrated tree crop system, coupled with his practical field experience in tree management on farmlands, strengthens his expertise on sustainable agricultural land use practice. He has a business, let's say, BSc in agriculture science and a diploma in education from the University of Cape Coast, Ghana. He also has a master's science in agronomy, land use in developing country from Copenhagen University, and a certificate in project management from Karlsruhe International, Denmark. So the last speaker is Pablo Perversi, who was appointed to the position of Chief Innovation, Sustainability and Quality Officer and Global Head of Gourmet of Barry Callebaut in September 2018, and has been a member of the Executive Committee of Barry Callebaut since 2017. Prior to this, Pablo worked for Unilever as Vice President Foods Europe, a business made of more than 50 brands in Europe, serving 370 million consumers. Pablo is a member of the board of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, Food and Nature Program. He studied industrial engineering and economics at the University of Birmingham and holds an accreditation from Cambridge University in sustainable leadership. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I will give the word to Michel Arion, but before going in there, dear Executive Director, we know that since 2012, at the first World Cocoa Conference in Abidjan, the vision of the ICCO for a sustainable cocoa economy was to achieve following objectives: sustainable production, sustainable industry chain, sustainable consumption, and strategic management of the cocoa sector. Can we say that agroforestry system in the cocoa sector is in alignment with this vision? Please, Michel, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Jerome and Ethel and all those who have organized this fantastic conference. I haven't prepared any PowerPoint. I think we had too many the last 3 days. But I must say I have attended most of the 3 days, and most of the speakers and most of the interventions were extremely interesting. And I want to say that I was pleasantly surprised to see how objectively the issue of agroforestry has been presented by all the speakers. And I think it's important to really look at agroforestry in an objective manner and to present the benefits and the cost of agroforestry. And because the title of this conference was already preempting the conclusion, the advantages of the agroforestry. So yes, I'm sure, and I'm convinced about the fact that agroforestry can bring a lot of advantages to the farmers, but it's just a balance between the costs and the benefits. And the balance is positive, I believe, but there are some conditions for that. And yesterday we heard someone emphasizing the importance of economic modeling. And I think it's important. We are here going to advise the farmers, and we are going to promote agroforestry, and we must be serious about our calculation. A good thing I heard also the last 3 days was that nobody was offering any template, any silver bullets. I have the solution to everything. People were again quite objective and also making the difference between the theory and practice, right? We have 25% of participants here coming from university, being academics, but they are supposed to be theoreticians, but they are also working in the field. And I think it's important to see the difference. And I remember yesterday, I think it was Elsa, explaining very frankly, well, the theory was expecting this, and in practice, we got there. And finally, the most important point, I believe, what we can also extract from those 3 days is that almost all participants have insisted on the role of farmers. The farmers must be at the center of our reflections, and we have, I think, a lot to learn from them. And that's a point I'm also very often making here within ICCO. We are working for the farmers. They should be our objective. And that's true when you are talking about biodiversity. Well, biodiversity that also include human beings and the farmers. The same when we are referring to landscape approach. Well, I love landscape approach, but with the people in the landscape. And that brings me to the agroforestry from an ICCO point of view. You know, we have adopted, Jérôme was referring to the global cocoa agenda that had been adopted in 2012, but that was for the entire community of cocoa stakeholders. For the ICCO itself, we have a strategic plan of action that was adopted in 2019 that has as overarching objective actually to contribute to the eradication of poverty, SDG #1. Let's address the poverty in the world. And within the cocoa sector, let's address poverty of the cocoa farmers. How can we address that? Well, by improving the livelihood of the farmers, and more precisely, to increase the living income of the farmers. I'm really happy. Today we have heard, I don't know how many times, people referring to living income. And I think it's really at the core of the matter in the cocoa sector. In this strategic plan of action that I just referred to, we are trying to identify how we can increase the living income of the farmers. And we have actually identified three main issues. The first one is clearly the problem of prices. So how can we get higher prices? And I will develop that point. The second one is how can we make sure that the farmers can provide some services against payment, in particular environmental services. And the third issue to be addressed is diversification. Again, diversification and payment for environmental services have been mentioned several times in the last 3 days, and I think they are key to understand actually the relationship between agroforestry and those three things. So I'm going to try to make the link between prices and agroforestry, provision of services and agroforestry, and diversification and agroforestry. The first one, prices. I think yesterday we heard Régis Méritant from the EU explaining very well that the question of prices was intrinsically linked to the question of sustainability. I think he said something like prices and sustainability are the two sides of the same coin. And I really believe that. And I think that all those efforts that the EU, but also within the ICCO, the EU and other partners, including Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, of course, we are reproducing within the ICCO, or trying to repeat within ICCO the substance of the cocoa talks that those countries have together. The main conclusion to illustrate the need for high price is that if we have a new cocoa, a new sustainable cocoa, well, we need new prices. And finally, on this thing, what Grisha, my friend Grisha said a few minutes ago about creating value is absolutely key. We hear a lot of reference to the percentage of the farmers or the producing country in the global value chain. They would have only 5% of the value. But I think that the problem is not there. The problem is not to get a bigger share of the cake, as someone puts it. No, I personally would not advocate for a bigger share of the cake. I would advocate for a bigger cake. And if we have a much bigger cake, Well, we can keep the same percentage as long as the global amount is bigger. So if agroforestry can contribute to the production of a sustainable cocoa, which I believe is the case, then at the same time, we must achieve higher prices, farm gate prices, of course. I will stop the discussion on that because we can speak a lot of that. Of course, the farm gate prices are a function of international prices, and we can discuss that as well. But I think the link between sustainability and prices is extremely important. Second one, provision of services. We have heard a lot of speakers explaining that agroforestry could indeed be seen through the lens of the provision of environmental or ecological services. This is very true. And I believe that if farmers can be hired to provide agricultural services in the agroforestry, in an agroforestry scheme, fair enough, they should be paid, they should be remunerated for that. But there is something much more important than agroforestry. It's the level of deforestation, the level of degradation of the forests. So I believe that, again, the bulk of the potential of the provision of environmental services is in the intervention of farmers in the restoration of forest. And the problem of degradation of forest is much bigger, and the reforestation offers much bigger opportunities than agroforestry. And finally, on diversification, again, we have heard several times, of course, diversification is an obvious opportunity to increase the income of the farmers. Not any diversification. I think Jack Stein in the first day referred to a smart diversification. I fully agree with him. We should not find or invent something that is not fully owned and fully supported by the farmers. And there are several types of diversification on farm and off farm. People usually refer to diversification as an on farm, so diversifying the products produced by a given plantation or by a given farm. And clearly, agroforestry offers this possibility of diversification and of additional income, additional revenue for the farmers with fruits and with timber. A very important point to understand here is that the farmers are very poor. And someone said timber is a saving account. Well, I wish the farmers could have a saving account. The problem is that they do not even enough income to spend on consumption. So they cannot think of saving money. So if you tell them, plant a tree, you will sell it in 10 years or in 20 years time, I'm not sure a lot of them will be convinced. So we have to find a way. With fruit it's different, of course, but we have to find a way to organize the financing of diversification through agroforestry that would bring revenue immediately in the first year after planting, in a way or another. It's financially possible, of course, to anticipate the future flows of money, but it's a bit complex. So we have to find a short-term solution and an immediate solution, and in that agroforestry solution as a tool of diversification. And finally, there is the diversification of farm. Meaning a diversification of the sources of income, and actually it's very linked to the provision of services, not agricultural services, but economic and social services. I believe that there is a lot to do within the framework of a clever rural development policy, with a lot of intervention at local and micro level, where the farmers can provide services, building economic infrastructure, maintaining the feeder roads, building a warehouse in the village and things like that, that could be financed with the development fund, and where the farmers could, when they are not working in the plantation, work for the community and being paid for that. So I will stop here. Just to summarize and repeat, I see certainly a lot of big opportunities for agroforestry in connection with our overarching objective of improving the income of farmers. And to respond to the question of the closing panel, I think it was called the future of agroforestry. I think agroforestry has a great future, provided all those conditions are met and provided agroforestry can bring additional income to the farmers. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Michel. Before jumping to the next speaker, I just want to give us just a few minutes to allow Ethel to change, to replace Charles, who is a little bit tired of translating. So Ethel, let us know when you finish.
Ethel is ready.
Thank you so much. Michel, when I was listening to you, I was so happy to hear from you that, you know, we have to put the farmer at the center of our reflection. Agroforestry is only one among, you talk about that as well, among many other responses to global problem of deforestation and forest degradation. And we should really be able to consider some solutions. And you spoke also about, you know, a lot about farmer livelihoods, living condition that might remain the center of our concern. You spoke about cocoa prices. If we have sustainable cocoa, then we need to have also sustainable prices, which is really, really important. You spoke about diversification, agroforestry as diversification, I mean, way of diversification, but also at the same time, more farms, diversification of income and things like that. Payment for environmental services. The farmer must be in a position of saying, if, you know, I have to care about forests, if I have to restore degraded area, then I need to get more money from that or get money from that. And I think that are really key reflection that we can build on. Thank you so much for this deep insight. The next speaker, as I said, is Richard. And Richard is well known in the sub-Saharan agricultural research sector through tremendous publication he has already done. I think one of your recent work, Richard, focused on the promotion of climate-smart agriculture and also climate-smart cocoa farming practices to improve livelihood and resilience of farmers and mitigate the emission of greenhouse gases. Can the feature of agroforestry be a way to, let's say, climate-smart agriculture? You have the floor, Richard.
Thank you very much, Jerome. I'd like to review a little bit about the science that we've heard the past couple of days, and also look at the future, look at challenges and ask a few questions, and then maybe draw conclusions. That is what we scientists do. You know, agro-ecosystems dominate tropical landscapes. There is no question about it, even though its potential value for promoting food security and conserving biodiversity has been overlooked. Climate change models have predicted that much of the current cocoa belt will become unsuitable for cocoa production over the coming decades. Well, as such, suitability of cocoa cultivation has been predicted in areas around highly forested areas with conducive environment. And so I'll come back to Michelle's point that does cocoa agroforestry prevent deforestation or not? We would see going forward. Current research work show that it is important we concentrate our efforts as scientists, as practitioners, as government in the agrarian landscapes for alternative strategies to protect biological diversity that are compatible with human needs. Globally, increases in agricultural activities for cocoa sustainability have contributed to a large extent to high biodiversity loss. There is no question about this. Hence, there is a need for careful land use planning to limit potential impacts on species of high conservation concern in these areas. A carefully planned interface of agriculture and forestry, which we call cocoa agroforestry, has the potential, which we have demonstrated, to conserve forest lands and biodiversity, increase cocoa suitability and food security. Now, agroforestry systems, as has been demonstrated by panelists over the last couple of days at this conference, play roles in buffering these vulnerable ecosystems by improving microclimate resilience on these farms. However, how farmers manage and structure cocoa agroforest in time and space differently affect plants and animals within biodiversity hotspots that overlap most cocoa producing regions. This, when properly managed, provides hope for the global cocoa industry. The discussion on how shade tree species selection, management, connectivity with forest patches, and general landscape configuration impact the value of agroforest for different groups of species, including threatened and endangered species, are also remarkable. The evidence is clear. We've shown it the past couple of days that an improvement in microclimate and plant diversity, coupled with good understanding of crop nutrition through carefully planned soil health management and microclimate improvement agenda, can contribute to yield improvement by enhancing the activities of various soil microorganisms and pollinators of different insect species, including midges, which would actually translate to yield improvement of over 40%. Agroforestry conditions impact the presence of insect pollinators and facilitate successful pollination. In addition, the enormous ability of this system to sequester carbon, both above and below ground, depending on the level of diversity and scale, cannot be overemphasized. Despite these, potential trade-offs exist that have resulted in limited industry adoption of agroforestry systems in the past. However, evidence suggests that canopy cover of 30 to 40% either optimizes or negligibly impacts cocoa yields in many regions, although careful selection and configuration of shade trees may be required to achieve maximum yield benefits at different age and stages of the cocoa growth cycle. Now, decoupling the shade cocoa yield relationship from the many other factors that impact yields across the cocoa belt is an ongoing challenge. Hence, there is ongoing efforts by researchers to identify appropriate agroforestry system designs to maximize yields while retaining important services to farmers and the environment. Now, going forward, it is important to reconcile conservation goals with existing governmental policies on agriculture and forestry. Extension messages should be packaged differently and on the ground practices of agricultural production to ensure up-to-scale impact. The major challenge is how to harmonize multiple and often contradictory mandates, roles, practices, needs of the wide range of actors living and working within the agrarian landscape. However, with collaborative research, effective monitoring, and good data harvest, partners can take up the challenge of leading a productive, efficient, and growing cocoa sector research for development as an agenda, with both male and female farmers invest in land-sparing technologies, which will result in improved yield for a vibrant market. Consequently, through these processes, globally important forest reserves of biodiversity and carbon stocks will be conserved as further deforestation is avoided through agroforestry. Food security will be enhanced through increased conversion of marginally productive cocoa lands. So therefore, there is a need for a comprehensive approach that packages good agricultural practices in such a way that explores cocoa farm productivity in an integrated, appropriate, diversified, gender equitable, profitable, non-predatory and sedentary farming systems to ensure sustainable cocoa agroforestry systems. Sustainable cocoa agroforestry in the sense of well-planned and well-managed farm enterprises that are periodically rejuvenated with quality planting materials through good agricultural practices and carefully administered crop nutrition through proper nutrient recycling. A good understanding of good crop nutrition through a carefully planned integrated soil fertility management agenda can contribute to yield improvement as espoused in cocoa agroforestry. But this is not going to be easy. There would be challenges, and I would like to name a few. The lack of longitudinal trials with different age yield profile regimes of cocoa trees and a various shade management treatment in different agroecological zones is making it very difficult to make any designs that fits site-specific agroforestry systems. The lack of emphasis on tree diversification in cocoa growing systems in national cocoa agenda embedded in complications associated with land and tree tenure security is problematic. Farmer perceptions that shade trees have negative ecological impact because of all the messages that we have given them in countries like Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, and on yield, and how social ecology, we need social ecology to play a role in demystifying this perception of negativity of shade trees in cocoa, and rather look at the niche differentiation that actually brings the profitability that we talk about per unit area in cocoa agroforestry systems. The lack of focus on understanding the interactions between native species and cocoa, and the lack of a scientifically validated framework that provides technical information for efficient cocoa agroforestry in time and space is worrisome. Low efforts to merge indigenous knowledge and scientific findings into a strategy to support the integration of non-cocoa trees on cocoa farms for increased financial and ecological benefits. Then there is also the lack of decision support tools that bring technology to the doorsteps of farmers. Now, how do we deal with these challenges? There is a few questions that we need to answer or think about in how we develop and design our research going forward to help farmers in cocoa agroforestry. How do we quantify the environmental benefits of cocoa agroforest for wider impact? I mean, for government in West Africa to understand, for farmers to embrace, and for civil society to actually deal with this together with farmers. How best can different tree species be configured into cocoa agroforestry? You know, there were a lot of questions yesterday and the day before about how many trees do we need per hectare, which kind of species do we need? These are all site-specific questions that are based on farmer preference and research recommended designs that we need to contextualize and actually make it specific to certain areas for farmers to actually apply this easily. Another question is, what is the appropriate balance of shade for different geographic conditions? Also, what are the selection criteria for trees in cocoa agroforest? What are the interactions between native species and cocoa? And finally, the question we should all be asking is, what effective and efficient ways can information be shared between stakeholders on the importance of cocoa agroforestry and how this can contribute to a decent living income for farmers? So in conclusion, I could say that current body of knowledge on cocoa agroforestry is increasing. However, work still needs to be done on the ecology, compatibility, and propagation of native forest trees, as well as the specific species suitable for the various cocoa growing regions across the globe. We need to help design and implement researcher-controlled on-farm experiments focusing on the study of the shade fertility yield interaction in cocoa and forestry systems to provide strong evidence for policy directions in the cocoa growing countries to help improve the living income of cocoa farmers. This is my submission for now. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Richard. I mean, you bring a lot of open question at the end. You brought also some challenges, but I will really focus on for me, the takeaway is really the way forward. You brought here, I heard some keyword like, how can we protect biological diversity? How can we, find a way of caring about the land use, a careful land use planning. I heard about improving the microclimate in the farms. I heard about the tree selection. What are the trees that are convenient for agroforestry and things like that. Richard, it is important you said it is important to reconcile conversation goal with the current national policy on agricultural and forestry. You spoke about collaboration between research and monitoring and things like that. Good agricultural management, agricultural practices, and one of the features of cocoa agroforestry is to consider agroforestry is I'm repeating what you said, is an integrated, appropriate, diversified, gender equitable, profitable, non-predatory and sedentary farming system. Thank you so much for that. And I think it gives us really, for me, way forward. How can we deal really with the cocoa agroforestry system in our countries? It's allow me to jump to my third speaker, who is Pablo. Pablo works for one of the biggest cocoa trading company in the world, Barry Callebaut. Pablo, you are in the sustainability business since years. What could be the perspective of the industries when speaking about sustainability and agroforestry in the cocoa sector? I know that you guys are doing a lot of things, it be in Cote d'Ivoire or in Ghana, and we're happy to hear about your perspective. Thank you, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Jerome. I want to start with a big thank you to all of you that have contributed in putting together this most important conference and making it available in such an important depository of knowledge like the Smithsonian Library. It is a great pleasure to be here for the closing of the conference, and thanks, Etel, for the opportunity. Prosperity of an industry lies in its responsible and sustainable use of natural resources. Without environmentally and social sustainable ways of sourcing embedded in our business models, there will be no chocolate in the future. We are very much aware of this reality and have joined forces with industry on various occasions to fight deforestation and restore forest areas. Cocoa and Forest Initiative, signed by 35 leading cocoa and chocolate companies together with the origin governments, was the first ever multi-partite commitment to fight deforestation of its kind. It already integrated agroforestry in its action plan by mixing forest and cocoa trees, investing in ecosystem restoration, and aiming to stabilize yields. Today, after 3 years of hard work, we have made more progress than ever before. But CFI is not the only initiative driving cocoa agroforestry. The German Initiative for Sustainable Cocoa, a multi-partite stakeholder initiative by the German government, has made a commitment to achieve 30% of its supply chain in agroforestry by 2025. Certifications like Cocoa Horizons or Rainforest Alliance are also building agroforestry into the needs of their standards. At One Planet Lab for Biodiversity, The work done on biodiversity is starting to be recognized and shared and will be represented in the World Food Summit and COP26. It is no surprise that agroforestry is generating such a strong momentum. As we heard in these past few days, the science is irrefutable. But what pleases me most about the current momentum is that companies are starting to find the value of agroforestry brings to all stakeholders, including farmers, along the value chain. It preserves nature by protecting biodiversity, restoring high-value natural ecosystems, and increasing carbon capturing. This, in a world where value of carbon is shooting through the roof and carbon tax is a reality, is a very strong motivator. It makes farmers more resilient to climate impact, whilst also helping them diversify their income. It helps improve the quality and resilience of the cocoa bean. It responds also to societal demands of responsible sourcing. It makes the consumers happier with their choice and driving educated increases in demand for sustainable product. So if we have such compelling business benefits and science backing us, what are the challenges going ahead? And I think you've heard many of these also from Richard. The first one is scaling agroforestry. To fully achieve its benefits, it is the biggest challenge. This can happen only when farmers realize the value and commitment to consistency in applying agroforestry models in their farms. The farmer has to become a business partner in this endeavor, reaping the benefits of increased yields and carbon offsets, as well as increased access to supporting services through understanding of business cases that show him the unequivocal economic benefit of applied agroforestry. There's scientific challenges. In the wild, cocoa trees is an understory shade-tolerant tropical tree. But it is no surprise that when grown up as a crop, it can thrive as part of a multi-species agroforestry system. Multiple tree crops can mean competition for light and nutrients, but cocoa agroforestry systems has benefits in extending the productive life of a cocoa tree, helping suppress pests and disease, contributing to better yields, soil health, sequestering more carbon, and greatly promoting biodiversity. This, however, is not the case for every crop, and it is essential to promote field research and good farming diagnostic in order to determine what the best agroforestry system is. And it is no wonder that you've heard that we don't have a blueprint for this, because there is no one-size-fits-all approach. And this has to be acknowledged by all the stakeholders if we are to succeed in implementing sustainable sourcing practices that embed agroforestry models. Last and by not least, governmental policy and funding are also very important and a challenge still. And despite all compelling arguments for better management of natural resources and protection of forest, we still find that agroforestry requires a specific policy from government that supports it, that encourages research, productivity, and takes accountability for land rights. That brings transparency and traceability to cacao that is produced in legal ways. All this cannot be done by companies alone. At Barry Callebaut, we believe that doing well, but by doing good. And this is why sustainability has always been at the heart of our corporate growth strategy. Whilst every business has to navigate the pressures of value generation through shareholders, the future and prosperity of our business lies in its vision to develop sustainability as a resilient and economically sustainable model intrinsically linked to our company. In a nutshell, truly successful sustainability projects have to become sustainable business models in themselves. This is our vision for the future, developing a profitable economic model where everybody from the farmer onward benefits, that is good for farmers, forests, and society as a whole. As part of our Forever Chocolate plan to make sustainable chocolate the norm, we are committed to the carbon and forest positive commitment that we've made for 2025 by reducing our carbon footprint and achieving a deforestation-free supply chain. We will preserve ecosystems and increase long-term productivity of cocoa in environmentally suitable areas. Our commitment is reflected in both on-farm and off-farm activities, engaging agroforestry, soil regeneration, and creation of carbon sinks together. We invest extensively in scientific research and innovation in order to strike that perfect balance between investment, scalability, and sustainability. A great example of this development is our circular biochar model. Biochar is agriculturally known as black gold and made from natural agricultural waste, things like shells, weeds, leaves, cocoa pods, which are burnt to produce energy and as well biochar. But biochar can then be used as a natural fertilizer to improve soil quality, and it can also create carbon sinks. Biochar applied to soil can capture carbon and store it for hundreds of years, thus creating a permanent carbon sink that can be monetized by the farmer as well. Field trials in Ghana and Indonesia, as well as research in Germany and the UK, demonstrate that our biochar can positively also affect the root size and the growth of the cocoa tree. And this means planting new seedlings with biochar can greatly increase the survival rate of trees. Going forward, our plan in 2022 is to use biochar in large scale for planting both cocoa and non-cocoa trees as well. Our commitment to restoring high-value ecosystem expands 5,300 hectares of forest in Africa and Indonesia, with different approaches that favor local communities and natural ecosystems. In Brazil, we have now bought a nursery that has started production and will reach 6 million trees once in full capacity. Considering that the cocoa tree is an autochthonous tree from the Amazon, we will be repopulating more than 6,000 hectares every year with new genetic biodiverse trees. Today, we're already doing more than 2 million cocoa trees around the world. Responding to the challenge of scaling, we are forever improving systematic agriculture, agroforestry implementation cycles by making transition from tree planting to scalable, fit-for-purpose agroforestry. We promote purposeful landscape and farmer prioritization, focus on farm diagnostics, and are nature-centric, offer access to high-quality seedlings, and verify results through our annual audits. This is coupled with gold standard certification and satellite image verifications as the trees grow. Over the last 3 years, we have increased the number of non-cocoa trees planted by 4 times in a number of different projects that we are doing. Our approach would never work without closely engaging with farmers in promotion of agroforestry models, offering access to high quality, fast growing, high carbon capture seedlings, and offering a selection of non-cocoa trees, which will directly benefit income diversification. We are helping farmers through technical assistance and business support, and we're offering success-based reward to them through our ecosystem services. In order to motivate farmers not only to plant, but also to ensure the survival of non-cocoa tree species on their land. The impact of this initiative will cover 200,000 hectares by 2025, with up to 70 trees per hectare. These examples of impact and our commitment to carbon and forward positive drive our conviction that business sense and sustainability can live very well together. And through leadership and the power of example, we show that everyone can prosper while shaping a better world for generations to come. I finish where I started. Thanks, Etel, for the opportunity, Jerome for the introduction, co-panelist. Well done to all for putting together a wonderful conference, and many thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Pablo. I think you spoke about a lot of things. The industries are doing a lot of things also to boost a sustainable and a responsible use of natural resources. I recall the CFI you spoke about, the German initiative for sustainable cocoa, I think, certification system like Cocoa Horizon you spoke about, Rainforest Alliance, One Planet Lab for Biodiversity and government policy as well. Like the precedent speaker, you said that it's important that the farmer becomes really a fully business partner. I think it is important today that we everything we are doing, we have to put the farmers as the center of our business, because they are the one who are in the farm, they are the one who can directly care about forest, who can also help in the forest restoration and things like that. Thank you so much, three of you, for this final session. Actually, we were not supposed to ask questions from what Ethel told me. I don't, but
I'm afraid we're a bit over time, Jérôme. But
exactly,
perhaps if the speakers want to each ask each other one question, or just have one concluding thought. Although I regret to say we are already over the end of the conference. Exactly. It's up to you as the moderator and the speakers. If each of you wants to just say one thing to each other, ask one question to each other.
But I guess, yeah, thank you so much, Ethel. I think it is quite interesting, and I guess Michelle want to add something.
Just one thing. When I make reference to the farmers, very often I want to refer to the farmer's wife. And I think we haven't mentioned enough the role of women in those 3 days. If there is something missing in that conversation and the discussion, I would say very rarely we have heard a reference to women. And you know, we are in Abidjan, we are in Côte d'Ivoire. I mean, we are very much driven by the African way of producing cocoa, etc. And I very often refer to the powerful Latin American women as a model for the African women. So I just wanted to mention that. I think it's really important. If we talk about human-centered and farmer-centered development, we must base all those discussions on women, I believe. Thank you.
Jérôme, you're muted.
Sorry. No, I was just asking if Richard also wanted to add a last word, or if we can move directly to Ethel.
No, just to respond to Michelle. I mean, we have done a lot of survey on climate smart cocoa and in Ghana, and actually most of the practices that are termed climate smart are coming from women. So the sad thing is that we haven't had the opportunity to do this on a large scale and to also publish. But I promise you, before the end of the year, we'll send you some gender transformational things that are happening in climate smart cocoa in Ghana. So the women, yeah, we should also push them, and they are doing wonderful things in cocoa and forestry and cocoa in general. So good points there.
Okay, thank you so much. Ethel, just to conclude on this session, I think for the 3 days for me and this last session showed us the importance actually of agroforestry diversity, and we consumer, producer, scientists, we are in a kind of diversity also. But one thing that is missing is that most of the people are working in a kind of silo, and there is really a need of deep collaboration, partnership, connectivity, so that we can really exactly. Thank you for this last slide. we think that we need to put really our strength together so that we can get to this sustainable cocoa agroforestry system. Please do not forget the farmers, because we are most of the time speaking in the name of the community, the local community of the farmers, but they need to be at the center of our work of the agroforestry, sustainable agroforestry system. So thank you so much, Ethel. Thank you for the 3 days. It was for me tremendous. And I think that this is not the last, it is the first. And we are looking forward for other nice workshops like that. Thank you very much.
Jérôme, thank you for a wonderful moderation, and I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Michel and to Richard and to Pablo. Your closing thoughts were remarkable in terms of being able to bring together government perspective, science perspective, industry perspective. We really wove together a lot of different thinking there. So you did a wonderful job wrapping us up after a fantastic 3 days. We all learned so much, even I myself, who am a cocoa agroforestry enthusiast. I feel that I'm just swimming in a sea of new, inspiring and intriguing lessons. And I am gonna go and put my thinking cap on based on all your wonderful suggestions, based on all your wonderful interventions about what the future holds, what we need to do going forward. I would just like to say that all of these things are being put online. We've recorded everything. It's going to go on YouTube. There will be subtitles, so you'll be able to watch the videos in different languages. And of course, also, we're getting the PowerPoints from all of the different presenters onto the website. Besides which, the website also allows you to just go with one easy click to the Cocoa Agroforestry electronic library that's on the Smithsonian website. And last but not least, inspired by all the outpouring of enthusiasm in this conference, our wonderful organizers, Andre and the others, have created a post-conference community of practice so that we can continue all these discussions around cocoa agroforestry, as Jérôme said, breaking down silos in a discussion group on Facebook. So I invite everyone who's here, everyone who watches this video, to please click on that and join the community of practice in Facebook and share your ideas, share your successes, share your challenges so that people can learn how to avoid the pitfalls that you've been able to overcome. We do have a couple of videos that will just queue up to play when this is all over. So feel free to stay on and stick around for some extremely entertaining and uplifting videos that give you more sense of earth optimism and what's possible in the world of cocoa agroforestry. And I would just like to conclude by saying a real thank you to our organizers, our translators, our co-sponsors, our panelists, our moderators, and our audience. It was wonderful to share this time with you all. Goodbye.